The first thing Mara found in the box, marked important, was Daniel's funeral guest book. The second was a green orchard ledger her father had bought in 1987 for $1.19. She stood in the middle of her new studio, with the ledger open across both hands. Outside the single window, a delivery truck coughed at the curb. The room smelled of fresh paint, old radiator dust, and the lemon cleaner Claire had used before leaving. Halfway through the ledger, behind a page of pruning notes, Mara found a folded tax receipt dated 5 months earlier. Bennett. Mara L. 14 acres. Paid from an account ending in 4408, her separate farm account. Mara lowered herself onto the one chair her children had brought from the house. Evan had taken control of the savings. Claire had taken the silver, just until you have proper storage. The house belonged to Evan now, and the car had been sold to somebody whose name Mara had never been told. But neither of them had asked about the orchard. For several seconds she could hear her own breathing and the truck idling below. Then the truck pulled away, leaving a silence so complete that Mara could hear something tapping inside the wall. 14 acres outside Wenatchee, and her children had forgotten they existed. The unanswered question was whether there was anything left there worth remembering. She closed the ledger when footsteps came down the hall. Claire entered without knocking, carrying a white plastic shopping bag and a towel bar in its cardboard sleeve. At 40, she had the same hazel eyes as Mara, and the same habit of pressing her lips together before saying something she considered tactful. "I brought soup," she announced, "and hardware." "What kind of hardware?" "Towel bar hardware." "I was afraid it might be hip hardware." Claire gave a quick laugh, then looked guilty for laughing. "Mom, I'm 68, not 108. I didn't say you were. You brought me a pill organizer with sunrise and moon pictures on it. That's just helpful. I take one thyroid pill. Then you'll always know where it is." Claire set the bag on the kitchenette counter. The kitchenette was a sink, 2 cabinets and a stove narrow enough to make a full-size baking sheet an act of optimism. She began unloading soup, yogurt, bananas, and a loaf of soft wheat bread Mara had never liked. The green ledger rested beneath the funeral book on Mara's lap. Claire looked around at the unopened boxes. "You haven't made much progress. I made enough progress to discover the bathroom has nowhere to hang a towel. See? Hardware." Mara watched her daughter smile. Claire could make any intrusion feel like cooperation. As a girl, she had once broken a kitchen window and then swept up the glass before admitting it. Daniel had called it evidence of character. Mara had called it evidence that Claire understood presentation. "Evan says the dresser won't fit," Claire said. "The dresser would fit if that plastic table weren't here. You need somewhere to eat. I have a lap. You're not eating soup on your lap. I've done riskier things." Claire opened a drawer, frowned at the 2 forks inside, and began rearranging them. Mara slipped the tax receipt back into the ledger. Did Evan get the final amount for the car? Claire's hand stopped for less than a second. "I'm sure he did. I asked him yesterday. He's been buried with work. He sold it 11 days ago. Then he probably deposited it." "Where?" Claire shut the drawer. "Mom, this is exactly why Evan offered to manage the account. You've had so much coming at you. Where did he deposit the money?" "I don't know. I can ask." "You were there when the buyer came. I met him at the house. I wasn't involved in the financial side." The careful distinction sounded rehearsed. Mara felt the familiar tiredness move through her, not sleepiness, but the heavy reluctance to start a conversation everyone else had agreed was unreasonable. Claire took the towel bar into the bathroom. "Do you have a screwdriver?" "I used to have 6. I'll bring one next time. There's one in the blue toolbox." "What blue toolbox?" "The one from the garage." A pause followed. Claire came back out without the towel bar. "Evan may have taken the tools to his shop." "Of course he did. He thought you wouldn't need them here." Mara looked toward the bathroom. One end of a screw protruded from the wall where an old fixture had been removed. Apparently, the apartment and I have both reached the age when tools are considered inappropriate. Please don't do this. Do what? Turn everything into proof that we don't care. Claire's voice had softened. That was the dangerous register, the one that made Mara feel she had kicked a dog. Claire came over and crouched in front of her. You were barely sleeping after Dad died. You left a burner on. Once. You missed an insurance payment. Because I was at the funeral home choosing an urn. The house was too much. We were trying to make things simpler. Mara looked at her daughter's neat dark hair, the faint crease between her brows. Claire had spent 3 nights at the hospital during Daniel's final week. She had washed her father's face with a warm cloth when the nurses were busy. Love was not the question, and that made the question harder. You promised the apartment would have a bedroom, Mara said. This is temporary. And dinner on Sundays. We'll still do dinners. You've canceled too. Evan had that problem with the duplex project, and I had a deadline. Mara glanced at the shopping bag, but there was time for yogurt. Claire stood. I can't win with you right now. No. Right now, you're winning quite a lot. Color rose along Claire's throat. She turned toward the window and folded her arms. On the sill sat the keys Mara still carried from habit, a brass house key that no longer opened her house, a small black key to the car she no longer owned, and 2 old keys she had not examined in years. Claire's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and exhaled. It's Evan. Put him on. I don't think that's a good idea. Then you talk to him. Ask where the car money went. Claire answered and walked toward the far end of the room, which was 4 steps away. Hi, she said. I'm here now. Evan's voice came faintly through the phone, fast and irritated. Claire glanced at Mara. She wants to know about the car deposit. Another stream of sound. No, I didn't tell her that. Mara held out her hand. Claire hesitated, then surrendered the phone. Hello, Evan. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. So was I when you sold my car. I told you I was handling it. That isn't an amount. The sale covered the detail, the rear brake work, the listing fees, and some expenses I fronted for your move. What expenses? The deposit on the studio, for one. Claire told me the landlord waived the deposit because of the short lease. Across the room, Claire closed her eyes. Evan went silent. Mara could picture him at his desk in the contracting office, his sleeves rolled up, sawdust arranged on his boots like evidence of honest labor. He had always worked hard. He had also always believed hard work made his needs more legitimate than anyone else's. I don't have the file in front of me, he said. Then send me the account statements. Why? The single word landed more heavily than a refusal. Because it was my savings. It is your savings. I'm managing it for you. Send the statements. Mom, I have suppliers waiting to be paid and a crew sitting idle because an inspector changed his mind. I can't stop every time you get anxious. I'm not anxious. Claire says you're having a difficult day. Mara looked at Claire. Her daughter shook her head quickly, but not convincingly. I found Dad's funeral book, Mara said. That's all. Evan's tone changed at once. See? This is grief. You start going through those things alone and then money gets tangled up in it. Money had not felt tangled when Mara kept books for 3 farms, caught a fertilizer invoice billed twice, or found the decimal error that nearly cost Luis Ortega an entire month's payroll. It had become complicated only when the money was hers. Send the statements by Friday, she said. I'll send you a summary. The statements. We'll talk at Sunday dinner. Are we having one this week? He did not answer immediately. Mara handed the phone back to Claire. Her daughter ended the call and stood holding it against her chest. He's under a lot of pressure. So am I. You don't have 23 employees depending on you. No. Apparently, I have 2 children doing my depending for me. Claire flinched. Mara regretted it before the words finished crossing the room, but regret was no longer enough to make her apologize first. After a moment, Claire picked up the towel bar. I'll come back with a drill. I have an appointment tomorrow. With whom? I haven't decided yet. That doesn't make sense. It's still true. Claire studied her. You shouldn't go anywhere alone until we get transportation worked out. I can call a car. That gets expensive." Mara almost laughed. Her daughter had helped move most of her savings beyond her reach and was worried about a $30 ride. "I'll be careful," she said. Claire waited, perhaps expecting more. When none came, she kissed Mara's cheek and left with the unopened towel bar tucked beneath her arm. Mara locked the door behind her. The old keys from the windowsill lay cold in her palm. One belonged to the orchard gate's former padlock, though she could not remember whether the lock itself was still there. The square-headed key opened the cottage. At least it had opened it the last time she and Daniel visited, 3 autumns earlier. That afternoon had been Daniel's idea. They had taken sandwiches and sat on the packing shed step while dry leaves scraped along the lane. He had wanted to hire someone to clean the place up. Next spring, Mara had said. There had always been another expense, another winter, another reason not to begin. By the following spring, Daniel's cough had a name. Mara opened the ledger again. Her father's records ended years before his death, but she had continued them for a while. Spray dates, water allotments, bin counts, notes on Rome, Beauty, Fuji, and the block of older trees on the south slope that produced ugly apples with excellent flavor. In the back, she found a business card browned at the edges, Ortega Family Orchards. The printed number had been crossed out and replaced in blue ink. She dialed it before she could turn good judgment into another word for delay. A man answered on the 5th ring. Ortega. "Luis? Yes. This is Mara Bennett." Silence then. "Well, I'll be damned. That's a warm, central Washington greeting. You calling from town?" "Yes. How's Daniel?" Mara pressed her thumb against the ledger's worn cloth cover. "He died in June." Luis breathed out. "Mara. I'm sorry. Thank you." Another silence followed, but this one did not try to organize her. Finally, Luis asked, "What can I do?" "Tell me whether my orchard is dead." He made a low sound that might have been a laugh if the question were less serious. "Not dead. How close?" "Depends which row you're standing in." "That bad?" "Some parts. Irrigation's leaking. Shed roof lifted on the north side. Weeds got ambition. And the trees? Some have fruit. Usable fruit? I didn't say that." She smiled despite herself. Luis had never sweetened an answer when an accurate one was available. "I want to see it tomorrow," she said. "You have a vehicle that can handle the lane?" "I don't have a vehicle. Then how are you getting out here? I'll solve that before breakfast." He paused. "Call me when you reach the gate." The next day, shortly after 3, Mara climbed out of a hired car at the end of the gravel road. The driver set her 2 bags beside the ditch and stared through the windshield at the rusted iron gate. "You sure this is it?" he asked. Mara tied her silver hair into a low braid. From one bag, she took her faded denim chore coat and pulled it over her rust-red flannel shirt. "No," she said, "but it's mine." The car retreated in a cloud of pale dust. Beyond the gate, weeds filled the lane. The cottage sagged behind a stand of poplars, and the packing shed wore a dark wound along one edge of its roof. Uphill, among leaves already turning at the tips, red gold apples hung from branches that should have been pruned 2 winters ago. Not many, not none. Mara fitted the square-headed key into the gate chain and leaned her weight against it. The old lock resisted, then opened with a hard metallic snap that sent a quiver through the iron bars. She stood still, listening. Water dripped somewhere. It should not. Wind moved through dry grass. From beyond the eastern fence came the distant mechanical thrum of Luis's working orchard. Mara pushed the gate inward and stepped onto her land. The gate dragged through gravel and caught halfway on a mound of dirt. Mara put one boot against the bottom rail and shoved until the rusted hinges complained. When the opening was wide enough for a truck, she stopped. There was no truck coming, but the gesture made the place feel less abandoned. Her bags sat outside by the ditch. She went back for them, pulled the gate closed, and looped the chain through without locking it. The old padlock might open once and never again. She slipped it into her coat pocket. The lane was steeper than she remembered. Grass brushed her knees, brittle on top and green near the soil where leaking irrigation had kept it alive. Fallen apples collapsed under her boots with small, wet sighs. Some were sunburned, some split, others freckled with disease. Yellow jackets moved lazily over the sweetest rot. She picked one from a low branch and turned it in her hand. A Fuji, smaller than market size. The shaded side was still green, but the blush was good. She bit into it. The skin was tough. The flesh broke cleanly. "Not dead," she said. A pickup door slammed beyond the eastern fence. Luis appeared through a gap in the poplars wearing a canvas hat, work gloves, and a gray sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off. He had grown broader through the middle and whiter through the beard since Mara had last seen him. He carried a length of bright orange survey ribbon. He stopped 10 feet away. "You came dressed for it. I own more than one costume." His gaze traveled past her to the bags by the cottage. "You staying?" "I brought a toothbrush." "That's not what I asked. It's all the answer I have." Luis nodded as if uncertain answers were common in orchards. He pointed toward the apple in her hand. "That block runs small. It always did if it didn't get enough water in July. It didn't get enough water in July. Then the trees are consistent." He almost smiled. "Come on." They walked uphill. Luis did not offer his arm, and Mara was grateful until the slope tightened and she wished he would. Pride was a poor handrail. She kept her breathing quiet and stopped once to examine a lateral line, pretending the pause belonged to the pipe. Water pulsed from a split near the coupling, darkening the soil in a widening oval. "How many?" she asked. "Leaks?" "Yes. I found 11 where I could see them. And where you couldn't, that's why I said 11. She pinched the line closed. The water sprayed across her sleeve. "The pump still runs," Luis said. "That's the happy news. What's the unhappy news? You're wearing it." He tied orange ribbon to the branch above the leak. Farther up, more ribbon flickered among the rows. Mara counted 7 markers before the lane curved. The pond lay near the top of the property, lower than she remembered, and filmed green along the shallow edge. Cattails had crowded one side. The pump housing leaned but remained locked. Her father had poured that concrete pad himself. He had believed every structure should survive the person who built it, which was less wisdom than a challenge he issued to lumber and cement. Luis crouched by the intake pipe. "Power's been kept on. Auto pay." "You've been paying for this? Minimum service and taxes." "Daniel know?" "Of course." She heard the sharpness in her answer. Luis did too. He stood and wiped his gloves against his jeans. "I wasn't asking who gave permission." "I know." Below them, the orchard dropped in uneven green rows toward the cottage and shed. Beyond the eastern fence, Luis's land looked disciplined. Mown lanes, supported branches, bins stacked square. Mara's side looked like a thought someone had abandoned halfway through. He pointed with one gloved hand. "North Block is mostly a loss this year. Too much codling moth damage, too much drop. South Slope has better color, but you'll need to test maturity. The 6 rows along my fence might pack if the wind stays down. How many bins? Don't know. You have an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. Bins require counting. Give me the opinion. 8, maybe 12 if you sort hard and don't lie to yourself. 12 bins would not carry the property through winter. 8 might not cover picking and packing." "What about direct sale?" she asked. Luis looked at her. "From where?" "The shed. To the 6 people who accidentally drive to the end of this road? I could put up a sign. You could put up a marching band. There's no traffic." She looked down at the fruit in her hand. "You always this encouraging?" "Only before dinner." A sharp electronic chirp came from Luis's pocket. He checked his phone. "My crew's moving to the galas. I need to go. I want your wholesale standards." "For what?" "For anything I can salvage." His face settled. "Mara, I can't buy fruit because I knew your father. I didn't ask you to. Or Daniel. I didn't ask you to do that either. I've got contracts. The packer rejects it, it comes back on me. Then reject mine before it reaches the packer. Louise studied her long enough to become irritating. Bring me samples from each viable row. 20 apples, random picks. Not the prettiest 20. I know how to sample. I remember. I also remember you winning arguments by having the numbers before anybody else knew there was an argument. That was bookkeeping. That was war with pencils. His phone chirped again. He started downhill, then turned. I brought drinking water. 2 jugs in the pickup. I can pay for water. You can return the jugs. That's not the same. It is if you return them full. She followed him to the cottage. He retrieved the water, set it on the porch, and handed her a business card much newer than the one in her ledger. County Extension has someone good now. June Park. Call her before you spend money. I haven't said I'm spending money. You brought a toothbrush. After his pickup disappeared beyond the eastern fence, Mara unlocked the cottage. The door opened 3 inches and struck something solid. She pushed harder. A swollen phone book slid across the floor, its pages chewed into a nest. The smell came next. Closed rooms, mouse droppings, damp wood, and the mineral bite of old plumbing. She stood on the threshold, one hand over her nose. "Well," she said, "no one's made an offer." The front room held a wood stove, a square table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a sofa upholstered in brown fabric, rough enough to sharpen tools. A framed photograph still hung crooked above the mantel. It showed her father beside an early harvest, one boot on a wooden bin, looking stern because cameras made him suspicious. Mara touched the frame. Dust softened his face. The bedroom mattress had been wrapped in plastic before the cottage was closed, but a mouse had opened one corner with professional skill. The bathroom tap coughed air and then delivered a thread of rusty water. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed when she turned its dial. One electric burner glowed. The second produced a smell like burned hair. She switched it off. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Claire and a message. "How did the appointment go? Please call so I know you're home." Mara sat at the table. The chair rocked under her, one leg shorter than the others. She typed, "It went longer than expected. I'm fine." Before she could set the phone down, Claire called. "Where are you?" "Hello to you too. I called the studio manager. He knocked and you weren't there." "You called my landlord because I missed 3 calls? I was worried. I told you I had an appointment. It's after 5. Mara looked through the dirty window. The low sun struck the apples outside, warming their red sides while the leaves turned almost black around them. "I'm staying somewhere else tonight." "With who?" "With myself." "What does that mean?" "It means you can stop calling hospitals." Claire went quiet. Mara could hear traffic on her end and the soft click of a turn signal. "Mom, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. Is this about the statements?" "No. Evan said he'll make a summary this weekend." "I didn't ask for a summary." Claire sighed. "Can you please tell me where you are?" Mara could have said it. The orchard's existence was not a secret, and secrecy would make it feel shameful. But she pictured Evan arriving with his measuring tape and his phrases, highest and best use, unnecessary exposure, unlock the value. She had been on the land less than 2 hours. She wanted one night before her children turned it into a decision they could help her make. "I'm safe," she said. "That will have to do." Mara. Claire used her name only when she wanted to sound like the steadier adult. "I'll call tomorrow." She ended the call and turned off the phone. Darkness reached the cottage quickly. Mara found 2 lamps, 1 working bulb, and a stack of newspapers from 6 years earlier. She cleaned the table with water from Luisa's jug and ate a protein bar from her bag. The refrigerator contained a jar of mustard, hard as rubber around the lid, and nothing else. She carried the green ledger outside before the light vanished. Starting at the shed, she numbered the blocks the way her father had. North, 1 through 4, east fence rows, south slope. She wrote what Luis had said, then crossed out his estimate of 8 to 12 bins, and wrote unknown. At the first marked leak, she measured the pipe with her fingers, 3/4 inch line. Coupling replacement, cheap. At the second, the tubing had split along 18 inches. At the fourth, roots had lifted the connection from the ground. Individually, none looked impossible. Together, they were a bill. A branch snagged her braid. When she turned, her boot rolled on a fallen apple. She caught herself against the trunk, but pain flashed through her right wrist. For a moment, she stayed there with her forehead against the bark, breathing through her teeth. The tree smelled faintly sweet and dusty. Her father used to slap trunks with his open palm as he passed, as if greeting livestock. Mara had teased him about it. "Trees don't know you're here, Dad. Then they're pleasantly surprised every time." She straightened and tested her wrist. Sore, not broken. The near fall had emptied her of energy so suddenly that the cottage seemed much farther away than it was. Back inside, she unfolded the bedroll she had packed and laid it over the sofa rather than investigate the mattress further. She kept her boots beside her and the flashlight under one hand. The cottage made noises all night. Pipes clicked. Something scratched behind the kitchen wall. Around 2, wind pushed a branch along the roof with the slow drag of fingernails. Mara slept in pieces. Cold woke her before sunrise. Her back objected when she sat up, and her right wrist had stiffened. She boiled water on the reliable burner, made instant coffee, and drank it wearing her coat. Outside, the sky brightened behind the dry hills. The orchard looked gray and diminished until sunlight touched the top rows one by one. Mara took her pruning shears, ledger, and a roll of survey ribbon from Luis. She climbed slowly, marking trees, counting fruit, refusing to favor the branches that happened to be easiest to reach. At the 6th row along the eastern fence, she picked an apple from shoulder height, then another from inside the canopy. She cut both open on the flat blade of her pocket knife. The seeds were turning brown. The flesh was firm. No tunnel, no rot. She wrote a figure in the ledger, checked it, and wrote it again. Then she called the number on Luis's card. A woman answered, "County Extension, June Park speaking." "My name is Mara Bennett," Mara said. "I have 14 acres, less usable water than I thought, and perhaps 10 days before my best fruit becomes somebody else's problem." June paused. "That," she said, "is at least an honest place to start." June did not ask Mara how she felt about the orchard. She asked for the parcel number, water source, last spray date, cultivars, and whether Mara could identify fire blight without consulting a photograph. "Yes," Mara said. "Good. Everybody thinks a black branch means fire blight. Sometimes a black branch is just a dead branch. I can also identify a dead branch." "That puts you ahead of 2 callers this week. June could come at 10. She warned that an assessment was not a promise the crop could be sold, the trees could be saved, or the costs would make sense. "You do specialize in hope," Mara said. "I specialize in keeping hope from buying equipment." By 9, Mara had washed at the bathroom sink in water that remained rusty for 3 minutes and cold forever. She cleaned mouse debris from the table, swept a path through the front room, and carried the ruined phone book outside with 2 fingers. Her wrist improved as she used it, then worsened when she forgot to be careful. She wrapped it with an elastic bandage from her bag. The support helped enough to be dangerous. June arrived in a white county pickup with a magnetic emblem on the door and dust up both sides. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, with black hair cut at her jaw and an expression that suggested she had already heard the explanation and would prefer the measurement. She stepped out, looked at the cottage, then at the rows. 14 acres? On paper. Acres are always bigger on paper. Mara handed her the page she had copied from the ledger. Block names, approximate tree counts, visible leaks, fruit estimates, and what little she knew about recent maintenance. June read it against the hood of her truck. "Who made this?" "I did. Last night and this morning." "You sleep?" "Not successfully." June looked toward the cottage window. "Mice? Apparently they hold meetings. That sofa in there?" "Yes. They're in that too." Mara glanced back at the brown sofa. "You could have let me discover one thing gradually." They began with the north block. June cut damaged apples, peeled back bark, and checked leaves with a hand lens. She spoke in short observations, expecting Mara to keep up. Codling moth, sunburn, bitter pit here. That limb's cankered. Mark it for removal, not pruning. You see why? The bark's sunken past the collar. Good. Praise from June sounded like a receipt. In the third row, she stopped at an old tree leaning downhill beneath a scatter of undersized fruit. Mara knew that tree. Her father had grafted it from a neighbor's stock after a freeze killed the original. June pressed a thumb into the trunk near the soil line. Wood gave under the bark. This comes out. It still bears. So does mold if you encourage it. Mara touched one of the branches. It's been here 40 years. That doesn't improve the wood. I didn't say it did. June waited. She did not repeat herself or pretend sentiment was evidence. After a moment, Mara tied orange ribbon around the trunk. They marked 9 more for removal before reaching the eastern rows. There the fruit was cleaner, the canopy less crowded, and Luis's disciplined irrigation on the other side of the fence seemed to shame Mara's lines into better behavior. June sampled from outside branches in deep shade. She used a pressure tester, a refractometer, and iodine on sliced apples. Mara recorded every result. Not all at once, June said. This row can wait. Those 2 can't. You've got maturity moving faster than color. How long? 7 days for the first pick, maybe 10 for the next. Your south slope will depend on weather. And packing? I can ask for a cooperative slot. Ask or get. Ask. They'll want an estimated bin count and spray records. I don't have current spray records. Because there weren't sprays, not that I paid for. June glanced toward Luis's orchard. Drift won't substitute for records. I know. The cooperative may take unsprayed fruit if it passes their inspection and you sign the production affidavit. They may also say, no. What do they charge? June gave her the current packing fee. Mara wrote it down, then asked her to repeat it, hoping she had heard wrong. You can't make the fee nicer by writing slowly, June said. Sometimes numbers improve when they see I'm serious. These won't. At the pond, June examined the intake and listened to the pump. The vibration traveled through the housing like a growl. Shut down the north block, she said. Don't spend water on fruit you aren't picking. Repair the eastern laterals first. If you have money after harvest, flush the system and replace the worst line on the south slope. And if I don't, then winterize what you have and start smaller next year. Mara looked down the hill. Smaller than 14 acres, much smaller. 4 productive acres beat 14 acres of expensive nostalgia. The words struck, though June had not aimed them personally. Mara thought of the studio, its 1 chair and miniature stove. Smaller had been Evan's word too. A smaller life, smaller decisions, smaller access to her own money. June followed her gaze. You disagree? No. I dislike how much sense you make. That happens. They sat on the packing shed step while June organized her notes. Wind moved dust along the lane. Somewhere in Luis's orchard, a forklift beeped in reverse. June drew 3 boxes on the assessment sheet. This week, sample, repair, secure labor. After harvest, remove diseased wood, assess pruning costs, patch the shed. Winter, plan rehabilitation by block. Do not buy a tractor. I wasn't going to. Everyone with neglected acreage wants a tractor. I don't want a tractor. I want my old Subaru. June looked at her. It's a long story, Mara said. They usually are. She wrote down the cooperative manager's name and promised to request a packing slot once Mara had a defensible estimate. She also wrote 2 licensed labor contractors and circled the one who would accept a small crew booking if any crew was free. You're behind everybody who planned their harvest in July, June said. I was busy burying my husband in July. The sentence came out flat and plain. June's pen stopped. I'm sorry, she said. Thank you. Does that affect whether you can do this? Yes. How? Mara appreciated the question for refusing to become sympathy. I'm tired. My cash is limited. I don't have transportation. and I'm likely to mistake motion for progress because standing still is unpleasant. June capped her pen. Then don't work alone on a ladder, don't repair live irrigation under pressure, and put every expense against expected yield. Grief is costly enough without letting it purchase machinery. When June left, Mara sat on the shed step with the assessment beside her. The orchard seemed changed, though nothing physical had happened. It now contained a 7-day deadline, a packing fee, diseased wood, 4 worthwhile acres, and 10 trees marked for death. She checked the farm account on her phone, $3,862.17. Taxes and electrical service would continue to draw from it. The studio rent had been paid through the month from her checking account, leaving $412 there. Her debit card for the savings account Evan managed had stopped working the week before because he said consolidating access would reduce fraud. She opened the summary he had emailed that morning. It contained broad categories instead of transactions: housing transition, transportation disposition, family support services, reserve management. The final line showed a balance less than half of what Mara believed should remain. She called him. Evan answered with machinery pounding in the background. I sent the summary, I saw it. Then you know everything's accounted for. I know you own a printer. He moved somewhere quieter. A door slammed, muting the machinery. What's that supposed to mean? Send the bank statements. I'm not having this conversation while you're in whatever mood this is. The balance is wrong. It isn't. Then the statements will prove it. I had to cover carrying costs on the house. You bought the house. At a price we agreed on because I was taking on repairs. The roof was 6 years old. The deck needs work, the basement has moisture, there were transfer expenses, moving expenses, storage. What storage? My things are in your garage. A commercial unit would cost more. So you're charging me to keep my boxes at your house? I'm tracking costs, Mom. That's what responsible people do. Mara looked at her father's ledger beside June's assessment. Responsible bookkeepers list transactions. You're turning hostile because Claire wouldn't tell you where the car money went. No. I became specific. Evan exhaled into the phone. Where are you? Why? Claire drove past the studio. You weren't there last night, and you're not there now. You're monitoring whether I'm home? We are checking on you. From the street? Because you won't answer a simple question. Mara heard a truck pass behind him, then the hollow silence of his office. I'm safe. Claire said the same thing. Safe where? I'll tell you when I'm ready. You can't just disappear. The astonishing part was that he sounded genuinely afraid. Mara closed her eyes. Evan, at 5 years old, had once lost sight of her in a department store and screamed until a clerk lifted him onto a counter. At 43, fear made him angry before it made him honest. I have not disappeared, she said. I have declined to report my location. That's wordplay. It's a boundary. It's reckless. Send me the statements. He hung up. Mara sat with the phone in her hand until its screen darkened. Then she opened the ledger to a clean page and wrote farm account at the top. Below it, she listed cash available, fixed expenses, estimated packing charges, labor, replacement irrigation parts, equipment rental, and transportation. Her first calculation ended with a loss. Her second did too. On the third, she removed the north block entirely, cut the predicted yield on the eastern rows by 15%, and delayed every cottage repair that did not involve water or fire. A slim margin appeared. It was so small that one flat tire could eat it. Mara called Luis. I need pricing, she said. For what? Mower, bins, picking bags, and a ride to the supply store. You want to rent a ride? I don't want friendship hiding the cost. Luis was quiet, then named hourly rates for the equipment and a per-bin charge. The numbers were low but not insulting. And the ride? She asked. You can buy lunch. Lunch is vague. Then buy the $12 lunch, not the $16 lunch. I'll need a receipt. You were always difficult. You remembered my number. He picked her up 40 minutes later in a work truck that smelled of dust, coffee, and apples. At the supply store, Mara bought couplings, clamps, replacement tubing, work gloves, mouse traps, cleaning bleach, and the cheapest firm pillow available. She put the pillow on the counter last. Luis looked at it, then at her. To increase yield, structural repair. They ate sandwiches in his parked truck. Mara paid exactly $24 for both and kept the receipt. When they returned, 2 empty field bins waited just inside her gate. "I didn't pay for those," she said. "Sample storage. They're on the rental list. There are 2. One's in case you surprise me." He drove away before she could decide whether the remark was kindness or a challenge. Mara spent the remaining afternoon repairing the eastern lines, section by section. She shut the pump down before every cut. The work was slow, awkward, and harder on her wrist than she admitted. Mud dried on her knees. Twice she installed a clamp crooked and had to begin again. At sunset, she restored pressure. The first coupling held. The second held. Water burst from the third and struck her squarely in the chest. Mara stood gasping in the cold spray, then lunged for the valve. By the time she shut it, her braid was dripping and her flannel shirt clung to her skin. From beyond the fence came Luis's distant shout. "That one hold? No, you keep the receipt." Mara began to laugh. She laughed alone in the muddy row until her wrist hurt, her ribs hurt, and the darkening orchard gave back the sound. She replaced the crooked clamp under the beam of her flashlight. The mud had turned cold inside her boots, and her wet shirt dragged against her shoulders every time she tightened the screwdriver. When she restored pressure again, the coupling bulged but held. Mara waited through 10 slow breaths. "No applause," she called toward the eastern fence. Luis's voice came from the darkness. "I'm eating. Your standards have fallen. That's what comes from having neighbors." Water traveled down the repaired line with a series of taps and shutters. Emitters that had been dry coughed out dirt, then began dripping beneath the trees. It was not much to look at. No fountain, no sudden greening, only measured drops entering hard soil. Mara walked the row twice before trusting it. In the cottage, she stripped off her wet flannel and hung it over the back of a chair. Her wrist had swollen above the bandage. She washed mud from her hair in the sink, heated canned soup in the smallest pot she owned, and ate standing because the mouse meeting inside the sofa had resumed. Her phone showed a message from June. "Possible packing slot, Monday, 7 a.m. Need final estimate by Friday noon. No promises." Friday was 2 days away. Mara set the phone beside her bowl and opened the ledger. She wrote the deadline, underlined it once, and began calculating how much fruit could be picked before Monday without sitting too long in field bins. The answer depended on labor she did not have. By sunrise, she had 20 apples from each of the 6 eastern rows arranged in cardboard produce trays. She picked without favor, including fruit from inside the canopy, low branches and limbs that looked as tired as she felt. A few apples carried dimples or pale sunburn. One had a fresh bird peck. Luis came through the gap in the fence, pushing an empty picking cart. "You know the bird doesn't work for me," he said. "Random sample. You could have randomized that one onto the ground. That would make me a liar. It would make you a fruit seller." He took the first tray to his shed. Mara followed along the fence line, pulling the cart when one wheel stuck in the weeds. The Ortega packing area was already awake. Adults in work clothes moved between stacked bins and a grading table beneath bright lights. A radio played somewhere above the hum of fans. The air smelled of apples, machine grease, and cardboard. Luis cleared one end of the table. He weighed Mara's samples, checked firmness, cut fruit, and sorted each row into acceptable and unacceptable groups. He worked without commentary until the piles told the story. Rows 1 and 2 were strong enough to consider. 3 had too much cosmetic damage. 4 was mixed. 5 had internal breakdown in 3 apples. 6 was acceptable, but small. Mara pointed to the rejected pile from row 3. "That scarring won't affect storage. It affects grade. The pressure is good. The buyer isn't making applesauce. The buyer could learn flexibility. The buyer has 3 orchards calling before breakfast." Luis wrote figures on a yellow pad. He did not soften them when Mara stood beside him. At today's price, he said, rows 1 and 2 are worth picking if your yield estimate is close. 6 might be. I won't buy 5. I'd wait on 4 and resample. And 3? No. You didn't hesitate long enough. I can say it slower. Don't strain yourself. Luis pushed the rejected fruit aside. If the cooperative packs for you, they may sort differently, but you'll pay packing charges on everything that reaches the line. Bad fruit costs money twice. I know. Knowing doesn't make it pleasant. Mara turned one of the scarred apples in her hand. An entire summer's water, heat, and stubborn survival rejected for a skin flaw. She put it in her coat pocket. Luis studied her numbers. Your yield is light. I cut 15%. Cut another 10. That leaves no margin. That leaves less surprise. She wanted to argue. Instead, she drew his pad closer and recalculated. The slim profit from the night before narrowed until it was barely wider than the line of pencil beneath it. What will you pay? She asked. For rows 1 and 2, normal wholesale rate on accepted weight. Same as I'd pay anybody bringing fruit that grade. Bins. You rent mine. Picking bags? Same. Payment when? After the packer pays me. How long? Usually 3 weeks, sometimes 5. Mara looked at the new total. She had enough cash to reach harvest, not enough to live comfortably while waiting to be paid. Luis leaned against the table. You can walk away this season and lose the fruit. The fruit is already a loss if picking it costs more than it sells for. I'm not picking at a loss. You're close. Close is not the same. No, he said. Close is the place where people tell themselves they can work for free. Mara looked around his shed. Nobody there moved as though labor were an abstract virtue. They worked because hours became wages and fruit became invoices. Her father had loved the orchard, but he had also cursed sentimental growers who counted their own labor as air. I'll include my hours, she said. At what rate? Less than yours. Everybody's is. She gave him a look. Put your hours in, Luis said, even if the orchard can't pay them yet. June called while Mara was walking back. The cooperative would hold Monday's slot until noon Friday. The production affidavit had to be completed. An inspector could visit that afternoon, but the packing fee would be due within 30 days, whether Mara's fruit sold or not. Book it, Mara said. You have labor? Almost. That sounds like no. It sounds like the next phone call. The first labor contractor had no availability for 12 days. The second laughed once when Mara asked for 4 pickers on short notice, then apologized and said everyone was committed. I can give you 4 on Sunday, he said. 6-hour minimum, transportation charge. Monday, packing starts at 7, then pick fast. The deposit took nearly a quarter of the farm account. Mara entered it before allowing herself to think about what else that money could buy. She spent the afternoon mowing the lanes with Luis's small tractor. He gave her a 5-minute refresher and charged from the moment the engine started. Dust rose around her until it coated her teeth. The mower struck hidden branches twice and an old metal bucket once. At 3, the cooperative inspector arrived, walked the eastern rows, checked Mara's records, and signed the affidavit with 2 conditions about lot separation. He did not admire her courage. He did not comment on her age. He wanted block labels visible and bins kept off contaminated ground. His indifference felt like acceptance. When he left, Mara called the studio landlord. I need to end the lease. There was a pause filled by keyboard tapping. You've been there less than 2 weeks. I'm aware. The short-term agreement requires 30 days' notice. I'll pay through the notice. You're moving out? Yes. Is there a problem with the unit? It doesn't come with an orchard. He was quiet. No, ma'am. It does not. The money hurt. So did paying for a studio she would not use, but keeping it because Evan and Claire approved would cost something she could no longer enter in a ledger. Luis drove her into town after work. He charged no equipment rate for the truck, but Mara bought fuel and wrote it down. The street outside the studio was crowded enough that he had to stop beside a loading zone. I can help with boxes, he said. There are only 6. I can help with 6. I packed them. That isn't lifting. She looked at him. You planning to win this? No. I'm planning to get home before dark. Claire's sedan was parked across the street. Mara felt the day change around her. Claire stood inside the building foyer holding 3 envelopes and the white towel bar. When she saw Luis behind Mara, her eyes moved over his dusty clothes, the work truck, and Mara's boots. Who is this? Luis Ortega. Luis, my daughter, Claire. Luis removed his cap. Ma'am. Claire barely nodded. Mom, where have you been? At my orchard. The answer was easier once spoken. Claire stared at her. Your what? The Bennett orchard. I know what orchard means. Why were you there? Because it needs work. It was Granddad's. He transferred it to me. When? More than 30 years ago. Claire looked at the envelopes in her hand. The top one carried the Chelan County seal. This came to the house and was forwarded here. Evan opened it because he thought it was a tax problem. Mara held out her hand. It was addressed to me. He was worried. He opened my mail. He recognized the parcel number. Mom, why didn't you tell us you still owned that land? You didn't ask. That is not an answer. It's the exact answer. Luis shifted beside the door. I'll start with the boxes. Claire watched him climb the stairs. Are you sleeping out there? Yes. In that cottage? Does it even have heat? A wood stove. Oh my God, it's not a supernatural event. There could be mold. The wiring could be unsafe. You could fall and nobody would know. I have already fallen without requiring an audience. Claire's face drained. You fell? I rolled my ankle on an apple and caught myself. You said you were safe. I am safe. Safe does not mean nothing uncomfortable happens. It means not living alone in an abandoned building. It isn't abandoned if I live there. Claire pressed the envelopes to her chest. Evan is on his way. Tell him to turn around. He's already furious. He can be furious somewhere else. Mom, he thinks you might be doing this because of the account. Mara looked at her daughter. Does he believe planting 14 acres takes less time than requesting a statement? You know what I mean? Yes, I do. Luis returned with 2 boxes stacked against his chest. The green ledger rested on top. Claire recognized it. You found that here? In the box you labeled important. I thought it was Dad's. It was my father's, then mine. Claire's eyes dropped to the ledger, and something in her expression tightened. Is the orchard worth money? There it was. Not concern about water, rot, or Mara's sore wrist. Value. Not today, Mara said. But the land? I'm not selling it. I didn't say sell. You were about to. I was going to say assess it. You assess things before you sell them. Claire's tenderness vanished for one clean second. You sold the house without even getting a proper appraisal. You and Evan gave me one. Evan had it done by a man who wanted contracting work from him. That is unfair. No, the price was unfair. Saying it is merely late. Claire stood very still. Traffic hissed along the damp street outside. Then her voice softened again. Dad would not want you living like this. Mara took the county envelope from her hand. Your father knew I owned the orchard. Knowing and approving are different. He wanted to repair the cottage. Claire looked away first. Luis carried the boxes out. Mara followed with the towel bar under one arm. I suppose this is mine, she said. Claire did not smile. Mara paused at the door. Bring me the blue toolbox from Evan's shop. I can't take his tools. They are mine. Daniel gave them to me. Then ask Evan. I just did. I asked his sister. Luis secured the boxes in the truck bed. Claire came outside and stood on the curb, still holding the last 2 envelopes. You can't shut us out because we made decisions you agreed to, she said. Mara climbed into the passenger seat. I'm not shutting you out. That's what this feels like. No, Claire. This is what it feels like when I stop leaving every door open. As Luis pulled away, Mara's phone began ringing. Even. She let it ring until it stopped. A message arrived before they reached the corner. Do not sign anything or spend any money until we talk. Mara opened the ledger on her lap and entered the fuel receipt. Then she wrote, packing slot confirmed. Labor booked. East Rose first. She underlined first, not because it was important, but because her hand was shaking. Luis's headlights swept across a silver pickup parked beside the cottage. Mara recognized the Bennett Contracting logo before she saw Evan leaning against the porch rail. He had changed out of his work boots, but still wore his blue company shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He watched Luis stop, watched Mara climb down, and watched them unload her boxes. You found me, she said. You weren't hiding very well. I wasn't hiding. You refused to say where you were. That's different. Luis set the last box on the porch. Evan's attention moved to him. You're Ortega? Luis. Evan Bennett, I gathered. Evan looked toward the orchard. You working this place? My orchard's next door. That isn't what I asked. Luis placed Mara's pillow on top of the boxes. Then ask your mother. She seems to be in charge here. Evan gave a tight smile. Thanks for driving her. She bought fuel. I'm sure she did. The comment was light, almost friendly, but it carried an accusation Mara knew well. Someone was either taking advantage of her or helping her disobey. No third possibility existed. Luis touched 2 fingers to his cap. I'll bring the bins over Saturday afternoon. I have 2 now, Mara said. You need 8 staged if your estimate holds. 7. 8. Empty bins cost less than wishing. He drove away through the open gate. Evan waited until the taillights vanished. How much are you paying him? Normal rates. Normal according to whom? His invoices and 2 years of county equipment averages. You looked that up? June did. Who's June? The county extension advisor. Evan rubbed his forehead. Mom, you've been here 3 days and already have strangers advising you, renting you equipment, and driving you around. You've had my savings for 2 months and won't show me a bank statement. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with why I'm sleeping here. He turned toward the cottage. The front door stood open behind him, and a warm square of lamplight fell across the porch. Mara's stomach tightened. You went inside. I needed to know what condition it was in. You did not have permission. It was unlocked. The door was unlocked. You still needed permission. I'm your son. That is a relationship, not a key. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. His gaze dropped to the boxes, the cleaning supplies, the new pillow. You can't live here, he said. I did last night. That wiring is ancient. The roof over the bedroom has water damage. The wood stove hasn't been inspected. There's rodent contamination. I found the contamination. You're making jokes because you don't understand the risk. No. I'm making jokes because mice are less frightening when they have committee assignments. Evan did not smile. He climbed off the porch and looked toward the packing shed. Even in fading light, Mara saw the contractor in him take over. His eyes traveled along the roofline, the posts, the sagging gutter. He walked to one corner and pressed a thumb against the weathered siding. This needs work. Yes, a lot of work. Yes. Have you had anyone price it? No. Then you have no idea what you're getting into. I have a list. A list isn't an estimate. An estimate isn't money. He looked at her sharply. What does that mean? It means I won't pay your company to repair things I can't afford. I didn't offer. You were about to. Evan stepped back from the wall. Under his defensiveness, she saw exhaustion. There were shadows beneath his eyes, and his company shirt pulled tight across a stomach he had not had the year before. Daniel's death had aged all of them, though not in ways that made them kinder. Claire thinks you're punishing us, he said. Claire thinks discomfort is punishment. You moved out without telling either of us. You moved me into the studio without asking whether I wanted it. You signed the lease. After the house was gone and my car had been sold, we had discussed downsizing for weeks. You discussed it. I was present. Evan kicked at a loose stone. So this is revenge. No. Revenge would involve your money. The words landed. He looked away toward the dark rose. "How much have you spent?" he asked. Mara told him. His head snapped back. "On apples? On producing something I can sell. You don't even know what they'll bring. I have a range, which means you can lose all of it." "Yes." He stared at her. "You admit that. Adults make decisions with incomplete information every day. You taught me that when you bought the duplex project before permits cleared. That's a business. So is this? No, this is Granddad's old orchard. It's been sitting here for years. Land does that. Why keep pouring money into it? Get the property assessed. There may be development value, water rights, something useful. Useful to whom? To you. I'm using it. To pick a few apples at 68? There was no cruelty in his tone, which made it crueler. He said her age as if it were a structural defect. Mara picked up the green ledger. "The statements, Evan." He drew in a breath. "I can have a detailed report prepared. Bank statements. I moved some funds temporarily. The night seemed to sharpen. To where? Between accounts. For yield." "What accounts?" "Mom, cash sitting idle loses value. How much? It's all tracked. How much of my money is in your business?" His face changed, not enough to be an answer for a stranger. Mara felt something inside her go quiet. Evan stepped closer. "I used short-term funds to cover supplier timing. The contracts are solid. When invoices clear, everything goes back. You told me you were protecting my savings. I am. You used them as a loan. A bank would charge 12% for the same bridge. A bank gets asked." He lowered his voice. "Keep your voice down. There is nobody here but mice, and you've already condemned them. This is why I didn't want to dump raw statements on you. You see one transfer and assume the worst. You hid one transfer and proved the worst. It wasn't one." The correction escaped him. Mara looked at his face. "Go home. We need to talk through this. Not tonight. You shouldn't stay here alone. I would prefer it." "Mara, do not use my name to make yourself sound calm." His jaw worked. Then he took his truck keys from his pocket. "I'm coming back tomorrow in daylight. Ask first. You're not serious. I have rarely been more serious." He drove out without saying goodbye. Mara closed the gate after him but did not lock it. The old padlock sat heavy in her pocket. She slept badly again, this time because every pipe click sounded like Evan entering. At dawn, she completed the yield estimate. She counted fruit on selected limbs, estimated per tree load, adjusted for defects, then cut another 8% because Luis would ask whether she had. June accepted 7 bins as defensible and confirmed the packing slot. The cooperative wanted the fruit delivered by 6:30 Monday morning. Luis brought 6 more empty bins Saturday afternoon and placed them just inside the gate with his forklift. Mara labeled each by block and row. She mowed staging areas, checked the repaired irrigation, and set clean picking bags in the shed. Sunday's labor crew arrived before the sun cleared the hills. 4 adults climbed from a white van with coffee thermoses and layered jackets. Their supervisor, Thomas, walked the eastern rows with Mara and listened without interrupting as she identified what to pick and what to leave. "Stem on," she said. "No drops. Row 4. Stays untouched. You want color minimum?" She showed him. He held up an apple slightly paler than her example. "This? Leave it. Expensive answer. Cheaper than packing it early." Thomas smiled. "You do know." "I used to. Same hands." The crew moved quickly, picking bags filled against their chests, then opened gently into bins. Ladders thumped into place. Apples made a soft rolling sound as they settled together. Mara worked from the ground until Thomas caught her dragging a ladder toward a tree. "You hired 4 people," he said. "I noticed." "Then why are you lifting my ladder?" "It was in my way. It was standing still. It was very effectively in my way." He took it from her. "Count apples." So she checked bins, watched for bruising, marked time, and forced herself not to perform strength she could not afford. Near noon, Claire's sedan stopped outside the gate. She came up the lane carrying the blue toolbox in one hand and 2 grocery bags in the other. She wore clean jeans and ankle boots unsuited to dust. Her eyes moved over the ladders, the workers, and the growing bins. "You're actually harvesting. What did you think I meant? I thought you were cleaning up. I can do two unreasonable things at once." Claire set the toolbox on the shed step. Daniel's initials were still written across the lid in black marker. Evan said it belonged to his company. Evan says many things near useful objects. I told him Dad bought it before the company existed. Mara touched the handle. "Thank you." Claire lifted the grocery bags. "I brought lunch. For me, for everyone. I didn't know how many, so there's probably too much." It was the first excess Mara had welcomed from her daughter in months. They spread sandwiches, applesauce cups, potato chips, and bottled water on the shed table. Claire began handing food out with the relieved competence of someone who understood hospitality better than orchards. After lunch, she picked up a harvesting bag. "Show me." Mara hesitated. "Twist upward. Don't pull. If the spur breaks, next year's fruit goes with it." Claire tried one. The apple came free cleanly. "This?" "Yes." She picked another too fast and tore loose a small twig. Mara held out her hand. "Bag, I can learn. You can. Slower." Claire's mouth tightened, but she tried again. They worked opposite sides of the same tree. For several minutes there was only the soft snap of stems and the distant forklift on Luis's property. "Evan told me about the transfer," Claire said. Mara kept her eyes on the branch. "Transfers. He says the money is safe. He says it's in his business. He has signed contracts. Then his bank should be delighted to lend against them." Claire lowered an apple into her bag. "If the company fails, people lose their jobs. That does not turn my savings into company property." He was desperate. So was I. He called mine confusion. Claire stopped picking. The crew moved farther down the row, leaving them in a pocket of dusty shade. "I didn't know he moved that much," Claire said. "How much?" "I don't know exactly." "You looked at the statements?" "No, he told me after you asked." Mara waited. Claire's eyes filled, though her voice stayed controlled. "I thought the account was just so bills would be easier." "So did I. I was trying to help." "I know. That doesn't sound like forgiveness. It isn't a verdict either." Claire wiped beneath one eye with the back of her wrist, leaving a stripe of dust. "Are you staying here?" "Yes." "Even if the harvest loses money?" "Yes." "Why?" Mara looked down the row. 2 bins were nearly full. The fruit was uneven, scarred here and there, but real. Because losing my own money on my own decision would still be new. Claire absorbed that without defending herself. By late afternoon, 6 bins stood filled, and a 7th was a little over half. The crew had reached its contracted hours. Tomas offered 1 additional hour at the same rate, and Mara calculated the remaining fruit before agreeing. When the final apple settled into the 7th bin, Luis crossed through the fence gap with his forklift. 7, Mara said. He inspected the top layer. 6 3/4. The bin is full, the fruit settles. You said 7 was defensible. I didn't say it would defend itself. Claire laughed before she could stop herself. Mara looked at her daughter, dusty and tired, beside the blue toolbox. For one moment, the sound belonged to an earlier kitchen, an earlier life. Then Claire's phone lit with Evan's name. She silenced it. Luis lifted the first bin and carried it toward the road. The apples shifted but held. Mara placed her palm against the next bin's wooden side, feeling the weight through it. Tomorrow the packer could reject half. Fees could consume the rest. Nothing was won. But something her children had forgotten now required a forklift to move. Luis returned before dawn with the forklift and a travel mug large enough to hold a private reservoir. Mara had been awake since 3. She had packed the ledger, invoices, production affidavit, 2 boiled eggs, and every fear she could not leave behind. Frost silvered the weeds along the lane. Each breath showed in the headlights. Luis lifted the bins into his flatbed one at a time. The apples had settled overnight as he predicted. The 7th bin now looked offensively incomplete. "You don't have to enjoy being right," Mara said. "I don't. It's tiring." Claire had gone home after the harvest, promising to call. The blue toolbox sat inside the cottage beside Daniel's kettle. Its return should not have felt like a victory. It did anyway. Mara climbed into Luis's passenger seat and held her coffee between both hands while the truck descended the gravel road. They reached the cooperative 6 minutes before the appointed time. Floodlights washed the receiving yard in white. Flatbeds waited in 2 lines, engines idling, red and gold fruit visible above bin rails. Forklifts moved through exhaust and cold air with flashing amber lights. Men and women in reflective vests checked grower numbers against clipboards. Mara's 7 bins looked small behind loads stacked 3 high. "Too late to grow more," Luis said. "I wasn't comparing. You were counting everybody else's. That is how comparison works." At intake, an employee scanned Mara's paperwork and pointed them towards Scale 3. Each bin was weighed, tagged by block, and assigned a lot number. The accepted gross weight came in below Mara's estimate by 4%. Luis glanced at her. "Say nothing. I'm breathing. Do it less accurately." The fruit would be graded after the morning's contracted lots. Until then, all Mara had was an intake receipt and a packing charge already accumulating. She watched her first bin disappear through a wide plastic curtain. Her father had distrusted packers as a class. Daniel had said this was because they turned apples into arithmetic before he finished being proud of them. Mara understood both men now. The fruit had occupied her hands, sleep, money, and attention for days. Beyond the curtain it became weight, color percentage, pressure, defects, size count, and price. Luis touched her shoulder once. "Come on, waiting doesn't improve grade." On the drive back, he asked whether she still did farm books. "I still know how. That isn't the same question. I haven't had clients in years. My office manager quit in August. My sister's covering payroll and threatening to move to Montana. Does she like Montana? She likes threats." "What system?" He named the accounting software. "I know it. I need 3 months reconciled before my lender review." "That sounds like you need an accountant." "I have an accountant. He sends emails using the word urgent and bills by the sigh." Mara looked over. "Are you offering work because you need it or because you feel sorry for me?" "Yes. That is not an acceptable answer. I need the books fixed. I also feel sorry for anyone sleeping with mice." "What rate?" Luis named one lower than a professional bookkeeper would charge and higher than Mara expected. "Payroll included, review only. My sister still runs it." "Inventory? Month end. 4-hour minimum? Now who's renting a ride? Work is not a ride." 4-hour minimum, he agreed. "You start after lunch if you want it." Mara entered the rate in her ledger before answering. 4 hours would cover electricity, groceries, and part of the studio rent she still owed. It would not rescue the orchard. That made the offer easier to accept. Luis's office occupied one end of his packing shed. The desk was buried beneath invoices, fuel slips, handwritten bin tallies, and coffee cups holding pens that no longer worked. His sister Elena, a 60-year-old woman with Luis's eyebrows and none of his patience, showed Mara the computer. "He puts receipts in his pocket," Elena said. "I put them on the desk, after laundering them in the washing machine. That happened once. Last Thursday." Mara sat down and opened the first unreconciled month. Within 20 minutes, she found duplicate fuel charges. Within 40, she located a vendor payment entered against the wrong orchard block. Luis hovered twice and was dismissed twice. At the end of 4 hours, the checking account balanced to the cent. Elena leaned against the doorframe. "Can you come tomorrow?" "If I'm not picking." "She knows how to answer." Elena called toward the shed. Luis appeared with a paper check. Mara examined the amount. "You paid the 4-hour minimum. I worked 3 hours and 52 minutes. I'm billing you 8 minutes for arguing. That needs its own line." He took the check back, wrote "arguing" in the memo field, and returned it. Mara folded it into the ledger. The cooperative report arrived that afternoon. She opened it at the cottage table while cold light pressed against the windows. The lot had packed at 59%, better than disaster, worse than hope. A little over half qualified for fresh market grades. Some fruit went to processing at a price barely above handling. The rest became coal with no return. Rows 1 and 2 performed close to Luisa's sample. 6 ran too small. 3, which she had not picked, remained exactly where it belonged. She entered the projected revenue, subtracted packing, labor, equipment, transport, and supplies, then added her own hours at the rate Luis paid her. The bottom line was negative. Without paying herself, it was slightly positive. Mara stared at the 2 figures. Her father had done the same trick for years, calling the difference ownership. Daniel used to tell him that unpaid labor was still a bill, only one the body collected. She closed the ledger and went outside. The harvested eastern rows looked oddly exposed. Branches lifted without fruit, relieved of their weight. Red apples still dotted row 4 and the south slope, brighter now that she was calculating what they might cost to touch. Her phone rang. Claire said, "How did it go?" 59% pack out. "Is that good?" "It's 59%. Did you make money?" "Not yet. Will you?" "Possibly a little." Claire was quiet. "Evan says you spent almost $4,000. Evan does not have access to the farm account. He added what you told him and what he saw. Then his math is bad. How much?" "Less than that." "Mom, I'm not discussing my account with Evan through you. He finally sent the statements." Mara stopped walking. "When?" "To me, about an hour ago. He says he'll send them to you after he explains the transfers. Send them now. He asked me not to." Mara looked at the empty rows. "Why did you tell me?" "Because I'm tired of being positioned between both of you. Then step out from between us. That sounds easy. It will not feel easy." Claire exhaled. He moved $42,000 into the company over 6 weeks. The amount did not shock Mara. Its precision did. "How much came back?" 8. "And the car?" "I found the deposit. It went into the same business account." "How much?" Claire told her. Less than Mara had expected, though enough to matter. "The summary says transportation disposition cost me money." "I know." "No, Claire. You know now. I should have checked." "Yes." Mara heard her daughter inhale sharply. She sat on the low stone border beside the lane. Dry grass scratched her boots. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "It was not enough, but it was not nothing. Send the statements. I will. Now." "All right." The email arrived while they were still on the phone. Mara opened the first attachment. Evan had highlighted transfers and added comments in the margins. Supplier bridge, project receivable pending, reimbursable management expense. He had made her money look busy rather than gone. A charge for the studio deposit appeared despite the waiver. Storage fees had been paid monthly to Bennett Contracting. The car sale showed a detail expense billed through one of Evan's subcontractors at nearly 3 times the local rate. "Did you help prepare the summary?" Mara asked. "No." "Did you know he was charging for storage?" "No. You supported every decision. I believed him." "You didn't ask me." Claire's voice broke. "I thought you couldn't handle it." There it was, stripped of tenderness. Mara watched a leaf turn loose and travel across the lane. "Why?" "Because after Dad died, you sat at the kitchen table for hours. You wore the same sweater 3 days. You kept asking whether the hospital had called. I kept expecting them to call because they had called every day for 5 months. You were lost. I was grieving. I couldn't tell the difference." "You didn't try," Claire cried quietly. Mara could hear her trying not to, the small, swallowed breaths. "I wanted someone to take charge," Claire said. "And Evan was willing." "Yes." "Of my life." "Yes." Mara closed the statements. "Thank you for sending them." "What are you going to do?" "Finish reading." "I mean about Evan." "I don't know." "And the orchard?" "That I know." She ended the call before either of them tried to turn the apology into repair. June arrived near sunset to resample row 4 and the south slope. She brought the refractometer, pressure tester, and a printed weather forecast folded in quarters. Wind and rain. Thursday night, she said. Could be mild. Could cause drop. How much time do I have? Row 4 is ready now. South slope needs 3 more days, but 3 more days puts it against the weather. Pick early and lose grade, or wait and lose fruit. June tested 3 more apples. There isn't a correct answer. There are costs on both sides. Mara called Thomas. His crews were booked through Friday. He could offer 2 workers for 4 hours Thursday morning, no more. The minimum and transportation charge remained. After he gave the price, Mara looked at the projected return from row 4. Book them. And the south slope? Not yet. She called Luis and asked about bins. How many? He said. 3. You have money for 3? I have money for 2 and optimism for 1. Optimism rents at double. Then bring 2. Clouds had begun building beyond the hills, thin gray layers in a sky that had been clear all week. Mara stood in the lane after June left. To the east, Luis's crews worked beneath portable lights, stripping a block before the weather changed. On her own trees, apples shifted gently as the first wind came down from the ridge. Her phone buzzed with a message from Evan. We need to discuss the money and the land together. Selling the orchard solves both problems. Mara read it twice. Then she walked to the gate and threaded the chain through the rusted iron bars. The old padlock closed with a reluctant click. It would keep out no one determined. For that night, it was enough. The old padlock refused to open the next morning. Mara stood outside the gate in 34-degree air, working the key back and forth while her coffee cooled on a fence post. The cylinder turned halfway, stopped, and trapped the key. Of course, she muttered. Commitment frightens everybody. She found penetrating oil in the blue toolbox and worked it into the mechanism. After 10 minutes and several words her father would have admired, the lock released. Mara left it hanging open and added a new padlock to her supply list. The cooperative's projected payment would not arrive for weeks. Luis's bookkeeping check had to be deposited in town. She rode with Elena after lunch, bought groceries, roof fasteners, a heavy tarp, and a brass padlock with a hardened steel shackle. At the bank, the teller recognized Mara from years earlier. I haven't seen you in forever, she said. How's Daniel? The question still had the power to erase a room. He died this summer. The teller's smile disappeared. Oh, Mara, I'm so sorry. Thank you. I remember he used to wait in the car and pretend he wasn't watching the clock. He believed banks made time pass slower. The teller deposited the check. When Mara asked for the farm account balance on paper, she printed it without questioning whether Mara would understand the numbers. Mara folded the receipt into her ledger. Outside, Elena waited in the truck, eating sunflower seeds and listening to an agricultural market report. You all right? She asked. Yes. You don't look all right. I've discovered those are allowed to be different. Elena nodded. Luis says you fixed July. I reconciled July. He called it fixed. Your brother calls pruning a haircut. He calls paperwork weather, something that happens to him. They drove back beneath a thickening ceiling of cloud. The forecast had shifted. The wind advisory now began Thursday afternoon instead of evening. Tomas's 2 workers arrived at 6 the following morning. Mara had row 4 flagged, bins staged, and the tractor fueled. She hired Luis's tractor for the minimum block because mud would make moving loaded bins difficult later. The first hour went well. The fruit came off firm and properly colored. Then the wind began. It moved high at first, combing the upper branches while the lower air stayed still. By 9, gusts reached the lane, lifting dust and turning leaves pale side up. Apples knocked against one another with hollow taps. Thomas called Mara from another orchard. Pull my people by 10. I booked until 11. Wind gets worse. Ladders come down. They can ground pick. You pay the same. I know. At 10, the ladders came down. The workers continued from the ground, reaching what they could and leaving the upper canopy. Mara watched fruit sway above them, close enough to see, too high to justify the risk. The 2 bins filled to within 8 inches of the top. Another hour would have done it, she said. One worker, a woman named Rosa, looked upward. Another hour might have done us. Mara signed the timesheet. After the van left, she walked the south slope with June's sampling figures in one pocket and the weather forecast in the other. The fruit was almost ready. Not ready enough for the best grade, but close enough that the storm could decide for her. She called Luis. "If I pick the south slope this afternoon, what will you pay? If it grades." "Assume it does." "I don't assume that." "What would you pay for fruit half a size count smaller and 1 day short on maturity?" "Less." "How much less?" He named a figure. At that price, labor and packing would consume nearly everything. Waiting offered better fruit or no fruit. Mara heard Daniel's voice from years of grocery store parking lots. You can't turn every risk into math. She had always answered that math was how risk removed its costume. This time, the numbers refused to choose. "I'm waiting," she said. "Then get your roof covered." Luis rented her a rolling scaffold and 2 hours of a worker named Ben, who knew how to secure a tarp without creating a sale. Mara paid both charges. Ben fastened the heavy tarp over the shed's damaged north edge and showed her where the roof decking had softened. "This is temporary," he said. "So am I." He looked unsure whether to laugh. "I mean the repair," Mara said. "I was hoping." They finished by 3. The wind had turned colder, carrying the smell of rain over dust. Mara returned Luis's scaffold, then replaced the old gate lock with the new brass one. The clean metal looked almost vain against the rusted iron. Her phone rang while she tested the key. Evan said, "Claire sent you the statements." "She did. You should have let me explain first. Your notes were extensive. They were accounting notes, not explanations. One said reimbursable management expense beside a payment to your company. That covered my time handling the house sale, utilities, disposal, move coordination. You charged me for taking my house and car? I charged actual overhead. Less than I charge any client. I wasn't your client. No, you were my mother, and I spent 6 weeks putting my business on hold. You used my savings to keep that business running. I used liquidity that was sitting there. It was sitting there because I had saved it." Rain began ticking against the metal gate. Evan lowered his voice. "I'm not saying every entry was communicated perfectly. That is a fine sentence. Did you pay someone to write it? Can we have one conversation without you cutting me?" Mara rested her forehead briefly against the cold iron. "All right," she said. "Tell me when the money returns. I have 2 receivables due." "When?" "One should clear this month. And the other? Depends on final inspection. How much can you return now?" Silence. "Evan, if I pull cash now, I miss payroll." She closed her eyes. "You made your employees depend on my inability to say no. That is not fair. It is exact. I'm trying to offer a solution. The orchard has value as land. You sell, replace the funds, buy something sensible, and everybody gets breathing room. Who replaces the funds? The sale does." "You mean I replace the money you took with money from something else I own? The company repays over time. Then let it repay before advising me what to sell." A gust pushed the gate against her hip. "You are 68 years old in a cottage with a bad roof," Evan said. "What happens when you get hurt? What happens if your business fails? That is my responsibility." "Yes." He went quiet. Mara waited, but he did not hear the rest of the answer. Rain spotted the ledger beneath her arm. She moved it under her coat. "I'll come out tomorrow," he said. "No, we need to look at the property together." "No." "Claire's worried. Claire knows how to call me. She also knows you are one storm away from losing what little crop you have." Mara looked uphill. The first hard gust moved through the south slope. Branches bent and snapped back. 3 apples fell within sight, bouncing once before disappearing into grass. "Then I should go," she said. She locked the gate and hurried toward the cottage. The rain reached full force before dark. It struck the roof in sheets and ran down the windows faster than the old gutters could carry it. Wind pressed against the west wall until the glass trembled in its frame. Mara moved the ledger, statements, and receipts into a plastic storage bin. She filled the kettle and 2 pots in case the power failed. When water began dripping through the bedroom's ceiling, she placed a basin beneath it and moved the wrapped mattress away from the stain. The shed tarp held for the first hour. Then a corner came loose. It cracked in the wind like a rifle shot. Mara saw it from the kitchen window, a blue edge snapping above the roof. She put on her coat and reached for the door. Another gust hit the cottage hard enough to rattle the dishes. Somewhere outside, wood broke with a sound too deep to be a branch. Mara's hand remained on the doorknob. She could cross 30 yards in rain. She could climb the scaffold if she dragged it back from Luis's fence. She could also slip, fall, and lie where no one would see her until morning. June's voice returned. Don't mistake motion for progress. Mara took her hand off the knob. The tarp tore free along one side. She sat at the kitchen table while the storm damaged things she owned. It was one of the hardest decisions she had made all week. Near midnight, the power failed. The refrigerator stopped humming. Wind drove rain beneath the front door, and Mara wedged towels against the threshold. She lit an oil lamp found in the shed. In its small yellow circle, her father's photograph looked disapproving. "You go fix it," she told him. The photograph declined. She wrapped herself in 2 blankets and sat upright in the chair. Daniel had loved storms when they were safely inside the old house. He would count seconds between lightning and thunder, though Mara reminded him every time that counting after the flash measured distance, not danger. She missed the annoyance of him. At some hour she could not identify. The rain weakened. The wind continued, but individual sounds returned. Water dripping into the basin, branches scraping the roof, something metal knocking near the shed. Mara slept with her head on her folded arms. Morning revealed the south slope beneath a gray, emptied sky. Hundreds of apples lay in the wet lanes. Some had split on impact. Others rested in mud with skins unbroken, already disqualified from fresh packing. One tree had lost a heavy scaffold limb. The shed tarp hung from 2 fasteners, and several sheets of roofing had lifted along the north edge. The cottage ceiling stain had widened by a foot. Luis arrived on foot wearing rubber boots. He stopped beside Mara at the first south row. "You stayed inside?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. I hated it. Still good." They walked without talking. He cut 1 apple from a surviving branch, tasted it, then cut another. "What's left might give you 2 bins," he said. "Maybe?" "Maybe. And the shed needs covering before the next rain. I can pay for picking or roof labor." "Not both." Luis looked at her. "Then decide what can wait." June came an hour later and reached the same conclusion with more measurements. The remaining fruit would not hold long after the storm. The damaged roof decking could be covered safely for another week if the loose material was removed and the tarp secured lower. Mara booked Tomas's next available crew. She paid Ben for 2 more hours to make the shed weather-tight, not repaired. The bedroom basin stayed where it was. By late afternoon, the clouds had broken apart. Sunlight poured low across the wet orchard, turning every surviving apple burnished red and every puddle gold. Mara was fastening the new brass padlock to the gate after Ben left when a polished SUV appeared at the end of the gravel road. Evan was driving. Claire sat beside him. They stopped on the public side of the gate, and neither of them waited to be invited before getting out. Evan carried a leather folder under one arm. Claire came around the front of the SUV more slowly, her eyes moving from the torn shed roof to the apples scattered in the lanes. Mara stood inside the property with the gate between them. "Open it," Evan said. "You can talk from there. We didn't drive all this way to shout through a fence. You drove all this way after I told you not to come." Claire touched his elbow. "Let's just keep this calm." "Then start calmly," Mara said. Evan held up the folder. I brought information, recent land sales, tax assessments, preliminary estimates. You need to understand what you're refusing before you make more decisions. You opened my mail, reviewed my property, and prepared to sell it without asking whether it was for sale. I prepared information. You drove here with it, because the storm proved my point. He gestured past her. The damaged orchard made an effective exhibit. Muddy windfalls, broken branches, blue tarp pulled tight over the shed, puddles reflecting pieces of sky. "This is what you spent money on," he said. "You could have been hurt last night." I stayed inside. "Exactly. You sat in that cottage while your investment blew onto the ground. My investment is still attached to 13 acres, most of which don't produce. Not yet." Evan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Not yet?" "Mom, this isn't a backyard garden. It's 14 acres of deferred maintenance. Irrigation, pruning, pest control, roofs, equipment, labor. You don't have the capital. I know what it needs. You have less than $4,000 in the farm account." Mara looked at Claire. Her daughter's face tightened. "I told him what you said before I saw the statements. You discussed my account with him. I was worried you'd spend all of it. It is all of it." Claire glanced down. Evan stepped closer to the gate. "That's what we're trying to make you see. You have a valuable piece of property and no reason to hold it. Sell while a buyer can still see potential. Put the proceeds somewhere stable. We can restore what moved through the company and set up a monthly amount for you. Under whose control? That's not the point. It is the only point." He opened the folder and pulled out a printed map. Colored blocks had been drawn across an aerial image of the orchard. The road access is here. The flatter portion could support estate lots, maybe small agricultural parcels depending on county review. Even if you sell to another grower, the land is worth more than one bad crop. You walked this land once when you were 12. I don't need to walk every row to understand acreage. You do if you're telling me what it means. It means security. For your company? For you. With the sale proceeds in an account you manage. I said we would structure it. You already structured my savings." His face reddened. "I am trying to put that money back, with my land, with liquidity the land can create." Claire spoke softly. "Mom, he isn't saying the orchard belongs to him. No, he's saying anything I own is available to repair what he did." "That isn't what I mean," Evan said. "It is what you require." He gripped the folder along one edge. Wind lifted the top page and fluttered it against his wrist. "Do you want me to miss payroll?" he asked. Mara had expected anger. The question came out raw. Claire turned toward him. "Evan." No, she should hear the real choice. "If I pull 34,000 out now, I lay people off. I lose current jobs because crews walk. Then nobody gets repaid. You made that choice before you transferred the first dollar. I was trying to keep the company alive. With money I spent 40 years saving. You weren't using it." The orchard went very quiet around them. Evan seemed to hear his own sentence too late. Mara's hand rested on the rusted gate. Behind her, the late afternoon sun caught the remaining apples in the hillside rows. They were not abundant. Empty spaces showed where fruit had fallen, and broken leaves clung wetly to the lane. The caretaker cottage and weathered packing shed stood just inside the property, neither improved enough to impress anyone. "You decided unused meant available," she said. "I phrased that badly. You thought the house was too large for me, so you took it. You thought I should not drive, so you sold my car. You thought my savings were sitting still, so you moved them. Now the orchard looks neglected, so you have brought colored maps. We did not take the house. You sold it. To you, below market, because you promised it would make caring for me easier. And it did. You had no mortgage, no maintenance. I had no home. You had the studio. I had a room you selected after you had everything else." Claire's eyes shone. "Mom, we thought you agreed. I agreed while your father's coffee cup was still beside the sink. I agreed because every time I hesitated, one of you said grief was making decisions for me." "You were grieving," Claire whispered. "I still am." Mara looked at her daughter. Claire stood in a cream sweater too thin for the cooling air, her hands pressed together at her waist. At the harvest, those hands had learned to twist apples gently from their spurs. Today they had brought nothing. I believed helping meant making things smaller, Claire said. No, you believed making me smaller would make helping easier. Evan pushed the map back into the folder. This is getting us nowhere. Open the gate. We'll look at the storm damage, and I'll give you a real repair estimate. I already had the roof covered. With a tarp. That is what I can afford. I can repair it properly. With what money? I'm not charging you today. Today? He looked away. Mara understood the offer before he completed it. Work recorded, payment deferred, obligation created. Another favor with a ledger kept somewhere she could not see. No, she said. Then at least let me inspect the cottage. No, I'm a licensed contractor. You are also the man who billed me storage for boxes in his own garage. That was an accounting allocation. It was rent on my grief. Evan struck the gate once with the flat of his hand. The iron rang. Claire jumped. Mara did not. Stop, Claire said. I'm not doing anything. You are. Evan stepped back. His breathing had quickened. Mara took the chain in her weathered hand. You may visit this orchard. Neither of them spoke. You may come if you call first and I say yes. You may come as my children, not my managers, my contractors, or my financial advisors. You will not bring sale documents. You will not inspect buildings without permission. You will not ask me to use this property to replace money you took. Mom, Claire said, we're worried about you. You may worry. Worry does not own anything. Evan's expression hardened. And if we don't agree to these rules, then you stay on that side. Mara began closing the gate. Its bottom edge scraped the gravel. Evan stood close enough to stop it with one hand, and for a moment she thought he would. Claire touched his sleeve. He let the iron pass. The two halves met with a metallic knock. Mara threaded the chain through the rusted bars. Her hand shook once, then steadied. The new brass padlock was bright against the cool gray metal. She closed it with a firm click. Beyond the gate, Evan and Claire stood beside their polished SUV on the public roadside. Behind Mara, Dusty Rose climbed the hill, carrying a modest, uneven harvest in burnished red and gold. The battered shed and small cottage looked exactly as poor as they were. Evan stared at the lock. You're choosing strangers over your family. No, Mara said. I'm choosing the people who ask before entering. He turned and walked to the SUV. Claire remained. I did bring the toolbox, she said. Yes. I came to harvest. Yes. Does none of that count? It counts. It does not purchase the next decision. Claire wiped at her cheek. I don't know how to do this with you now. Start by knocking. Evan called her name from the driver's seat. Claire looked toward him, then back at Mara. What if you need us? I will call. And if you don't? Then I didn't. Claire gave a small nod that seemed to hurt. She returned to the SUV. Mara watched them reverse down the gravel road. The tires threw a light trail of dust through the golden air. Neither waved. When the vehicle vanished, she kept one hand on the padlock. The resolve drained first. Hurt followed, deep and physical. She leaned her forehead against the iron and cried where no one could mistake it for surrender. That evening, she could not balance the ledger. She entered the tarp twice, forgot Ben's second hour, and wrote the labor deposit in the income column. After the third mistake, she closed the book and heated soup. A message from Claire appeared. I'm sorry we came like that. Mara read it and set the phone face down. The next morning, Thomas's crew collected what the storm had spared. The south slope yielded one full bin and a little more than half of another. Windfalls remained underfoot, sweetening the cold air as they bruised. Rosa picked beside Mara from the ground. My mother had peach trees, she said, dropping an apple gently into her bag. After my father died, she cut every one down. Why? Said she was tired of fruit asking questions. Mara looked at the ruined apples in the lane. Did she regret it? She regretted the shade. By noon, the surviving fruit was in Luis's bins. He sampled it at the shed and rejected more than Mara expected. "Storm bruising," he said, cutting one open. "That apple never hit the ground. Branches hit each other. What about processing? Price won't cover hauling that small lot separately." Mara hated the answer because she had already calculated the same one. Luis accepted the clean portion under his normal wholesale terms. The rejected fruit stayed in the bin. "What do I do with it?" she asked. "Whatever costs least." The crew left. Luis moved the accepted fruit across the eastern fence. Mara stood beside the rejected apples, each one too good to feel worthless and too damaged to sell profitably. She carried a bag to the cottage, though she could not eat that many. She set another aside for Elena and one for June. The rest remained. In the afternoon, June inspected the broken scaffold limb and the stripped south slope. She marked winter removals and revised the rehabilitation plan. "You preserved row 4, she said. "Barely. Barely is a measurement." Mara showed her the season's numbers. June read them at the kitchen table. "If the cooperative payment lands near projection and Luis pays his estimate, you finish a little above cash cost, and below cost if I count my labor." "Yes. So the orchard cannot support me." "This harvest can't." June turned to a blank page and drew a line through the middle. "You don't have to operate all viable blocks alone. A crop share arrangement could bring labor and equipment onto selected rows without transferring ownership." Mara's shoulders tightened. "I am not giving anyone control. I didn't say control. I said a contract defining who provides what and how the crop is divided. Contracts define control. Then write one that defines yours." Mara looked toward the locked gate. "Luis?" she asked. "He may be interested. So might another grower. Neither will rehabilitate unprofitable rows out of affection." "Good." June raised an eyebrow. "Affection has been expensive lately." June folded the numbers and handed them back. "Think in 3 seasons, not 3 weeks. After she left, Mara opened Claire's message again. She typed, "The gate rules stand." Then, after a long pause, she added, "You may come Sunday for coffee if you call first." Claire replied within a minute, "I'll call Saturday." It was not an apology accepted or a family restored. It was a knock. Claire called at 11. "Saturday morning. Is tomorrow still all right?" "Yes." "What time?" 10. "Should I bring anything?" "Yourself." A pause followed. "Would coffee be insulting?" "Only if it's bad. I'll go to the place Dad liked. Your father liked coffee that could remove paint. I'll ask them to weaken it." Claire arrived at 9:58 and stopped outside the gate. She got out, walked to the iron bars, and waited. Mara had seen the sedan from the cottage window. She let Claire stand there for a full minute, not as punishment, but because rushing to reward basic courtesy would make the courtesy feel ceremonial. When Mara reached the gate, Claire held up 2 paper cups. "I called and knocked." "You did? May I come in?" "Yes." Mara unlocked the brass padlock. Claire entered without looking toward the shed or the upper rows. She followed Mara to the cottage and wiped her boots on the mat. The gesture was so deliberate that Mara almost told her to stop performing. Then she noticed the mud Claire had left outside. Performance had uses. Inside, Claire took in the basin beneath the bedroom leak, the mouse traps and the blankets folded on the chair. Her mouth tightened, but she said only, "Where should I put the coffee?" "The table." She had also brought a flat cardboard box. From it, she removed Daniel's chipped blue mug, Mara's good paring knife, 2 framed photographs, and the red wool throw that had always lived over the back of the sofa in the old house. "I thought these belonged here," Claire said. Mara lifted the mug. "Where did you find it?" "Evan's garage, in a box marked kitchen, miscellaneous." "Your father would object to being miscellaneous." I told him that. Mara draped the throw over one of the wooden chairs. It changed the room more than fresh paint could have. They drank coffee. Claire asked about the storm, and Mara told her which rows had been lost, what fruit remained, and what the roof patch cost. She did not minimize the damage. Claire listened without converting every fact into evidence. "What happens now?" she asked. "I wait for the cooperative payment. I work for Luis. I price the roof. And the orchard?" June suggested crop-sharing selected blocks. Claire's fingers tightened around her cup. "Does that mean someone else owns part of it?" "No. Could it become that?" "Not if the agreement is competent. Who reviews it?" "I do." "I meant a lawyer. I know what you meant. I will have any final contract reviewed." Claire nodded. "Good." The word irritated Mara anyway. "Your approval is not required." "I wasn't approving." "You said good in your approving voice." "I have an approving voice?" "You have several." Claire stared into her coffee. "I don't know how to say anything without you hearing the old thing underneath it. The old thing is recent, I know." A mousetrap snapped beneath the kitchen cabinet. Claire jumped hard enough to spill coffee onto her wrist. Mara handed her a towel. "That was your approved safety system." Claire began to laugh. She pressed the towel to her mouth, horrified by herself, and Mara laughed too. The mouse had escaped. The trap held only a tuft of gray fur, which made the laughter more acceptable. When it faded, Claire sat quietly. "Evan says I betrayed him," she said. "By sending the statements?" "Yes. You sent me my own records." "I know. Then the problem is his. He says the company could collapse." "It may. He says if you sell, he can restore everything immediately." "No, if I sell, I can replace what he took. That does not mean he restored it." Claire rubbed the wet spot on her sleeve. "He doesn't see the difference. He cannot afford to." "Are you going to make him sell his house? The house that was mine?" Claire flinched. "No," Mara said. "I am not taking another home to replace mine. You could demand it back. I could demand many things he cannot provide. I want statements each month, no more transfers, repayment when invoices clear, and no access to anything else I own. He wants to talk to you. He knows the gate rules." Claire looked toward the window. "He's afraid you'll never forgive him. That is not the same as being sorry." Before leaving, Claire helped Mara carry the ruined sofa onto the porch. They wore gloves and lifted from opposite ends. The mouse meeting scattered behind them, 3 gray bodies streaking beneath the cottage. Claire screamed, dropped her end, then laughed until she had to lean against the wall. "You grew up in an orchard," Mara said. "I grew up in a house near an orchard. Civilization has weakened you." They left the sofa upside down beside the shed for disposal. At the gate, Claire waited for Mara to lock it after her. "Next Sunday?" she asked. "We'll see. That's fair." On Monday, Luis sat across from Mara in his office with June's crop-sharing worksheet between them. "I'm interested in the 6 eastern rows," he said. "Not the north block. I know, south slope depends on pruning response. I won't commit equipment there until we see next summer's set. I know that too." Luis frowned. "Then why are we talking?" "To identify the part I don't know." He tapped the worksheet. "I provide equipment, spray program, thinning labor, harvest crew, bins, and packing access. Direct costs come off gross. Remaining crop revenue split 60-40, 50-50. I take production risk. I provide land, water, existing trees, and record keeping. The trees are why I said 60-40. 55-45 to me." Luis leaned back. "You've become unreasonable since living alone. I was unreasonable before. You had fewer invoices with me." They spent 2 hours defining terms. Mara would retain all ownership and approve removal of trees. Luis would control spray timing and harvest logistics within the selected rows, subject to a written annual budget. Water and taxes remained Mara's responsibility. Equipment, labor, packing, and crop insurance would be charged against those rows, not the whole property. The share remained unsettled. "What role do you want?" Luis asked. Operational records, block costs, production tracking, pack-out review. That's bookkeeping. It is also knowing whether you move my money." His expression changed. He had heard enough from Elena to understand the reference. "I'll pay separately for those hours," he said, "at the rate you pay me now. Seasonal average. Capped. No cap without a minimum." June, seated at the end of the desk, looked from one to the other. "You understand this is supposed to save labor?" "Not yours," Louise said. They agreed to create a 3-year proposal, renewable annually only for defined cause during the establishment period. Nothing would be signed until projected rehabilitation costs were attached and an independent lawyer reviewed it. It was not rescue. Under conservative yield, Mara's share would barely cover property expenses the first year. A better second year could pay part of the cottage repairs. A bad crop could pay nothing. But the trees would receive pruning, water, pest management, and market access without requiring Mara to buy equipment she could not use alone. After the meeting, Elena introduced Mara to Ruth Caldwell, who ran a small pear orchard 2 roads west and had 6 months of unreconciled accounts. "Louise says you charge by the argument," Ruth said. "Only family rates. Ruth hired her for 8 hours a month through winter." Mara entered the work in her ledger before leaving the office. At the gate, a white envelope had been tucked behind the chain. Bennett Contracting was printed in blue across the corner. Mara called Evan. "Did you come onto the property?" "No, I left it at the gate." That answer mattered. "What is it?" "An estimate for the cottage and shed. You asked what repairs cost." "I did not ask you. You said you couldn't afford a proper roof. I can schedule a crew between projects." "Why?" "Because winter is coming." She heard strain beneath his impatience. "And payment?" "Deferred." "Secured by what?" "It's explained in the proposal." Mara opened the envelope on the cottage table. The estimate listed roof replacement, electrical work, mold treatment not yet proven necessary, shed stabilization, project management, temporary storage, and contingency fees. The total was high enough to consume several years of optimistic crop income. Attached was a deferred payment agreement. If unpaid after 12 months, Bennett Contracting could record a lien against the orchard. Mara read the clause twice. "You want a claim on my land. It's standard protection. For work I did not request. I discounted labor 20%. You added project management at 15%. That covers supervision and storage. We'd need to move your things during construction. My things fit in 6 boxes. It's a template." So was the summary. He was silent. Mara took a pencil and marked only the urgent roof patch, heater inspection, and 1 electrical circuit. "I'm getting independent prices for essential work. Patching costs more long-term. Long-term is built from what I can pay today. I'm offering you credit. You already took credit." "That is a cheap shot." "No. A cheap shot would include no numbers." Evan breathed into the phone. "I left the estimate because I'm trying to do something useful. Then send me a repayment schedule. I told you the receivable hasn't cleared. Send me the schedule anyway. What about the roof? No lien, no full renovation, no work by your company. You would rather pay strangers. I would rather pay people whose bill ends the relationship." She folded the proposal along its original crease. "Can I come Sunday?" Evan asked. Mara looked at the red throw, Daniel's mug, and the basin catching another slow drop. "Call Saturday," she said. It was not permission. He understood that because he said, "All right." The cooperative payment arrived Wednesday. It was slightly higher than the projection because the accepted fruit had caught a modest price increase. After every harvest bill, the farm account stood above its opening balance by $216. Mara counted her labor as an expense. With that included, the orchard had lost money. She entered both figures, then circled neither. The $216 would not repair a roof, replace a car, or undo a transfer. It bought weather stripping, 2 used space heaters after inspection, and part of the independent roofer's deposit for a proper cottage patch. Mara closed the ledger. Outside, the harvested trees stood lighter beneath the pale autumn sky. Beyond them, Luis's crews moved steadily through his final blocks. For the first time, Mara could see the difference between an orchard that had paid her and an orchard that might one day support her. It was exactly $216 wide. The independent roofer arrived with a moisture meter, a folding ladder, and no interest in Mara's family. His name was Dale. He tested the bedroom ceiling, inspected the attic, walked the cottage roof, and photographed every area he intended to include in his estimate. When Mara asked about replacing the entire roof, he shook his head. "Not this year. You're talking yourself out of money. I'm talking you out of buying shingles where the decking is sound." He priced a permanent patch around the failed flashing replacement of 2 damaged sheets and repairs to the gutter that had backed water beneath the edge. The amount was less than half Evan's cottage allocation and did not include mold treatment, project management, storage, or emotional supervision. "When can you do it?" "Tuesday, if the weather holds." "Payment?" "Half when materials arrive. Half when you climb into the attic and agree it's dry." "I may not climb into the attic. Then I'll take pictures." "What prevents you from using pictures of somebody else's attic?" Dale looked at her for a moment. "Luis said you'd be fun. He owes me 8 minutes. Mara paid the deposit from bookkeeping wages and the orchard's narrow cash surplus. The farm balance dipped below where it had started, but the roof repair belonged to the cottage, not the crop." She gave the expense its own page, so neither success nor failure could hide inside the other. Evan called Saturday at 4. "I'd like to come tomorrow," he said. "What for?" "To see you. Anything else?" "I have a repayment schedule." "Is it a sale proposal?" "No, a construction proposal." "No, then 10 o'clock. When he arrived, he parked outside the gate and called from the SUV. He was alone. Mara watched him through the cottage window for a minute before walking down. He held no leather folder. In one hand was a paper sack from the bakery, where Daniel used to buy cinnamon rolls too large for breakfast and too sweet for lunch. "You may come in," Mara said. Evan glanced at the brass padlock as she opened it. "Do you lock this all the time now? When I'm alone or away?" "Good." She looked at him. "I'm allowed to think one safety measure is good. You are allowed to think anything silently." He almost smiled. It vanished before becoming an invitation. Inside the cottage, Evan set the bakery sack on the table. His eyes immediately found the ceiling stain, the space heaters, and the outlet Dale had marked for an electrician. "I know," Mara said. "I didn't say anything. You inspected 3 things before removing your coat. I have eyes. You also have a cinnamon roll." They sat across from each other. Mara cut one roll in half with her good paring knife and placed the pieces on mismatched plates. Evan watched her, perhaps remembering the old kitchen where Daniel had always claimed the center. "I have a receivable clearing Wednesday," he said. "How much?" $47,000 net, 39 after supplier balances. "And payroll?" "Covered through next Friday." He took a folded sheet from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. Mara opened it. This was not a summary. It listed dates, amounts, and sources. A payment of $5,000 on Wednesday, then monthly payments of $1,500, with larger principal payments when 2 specified projects closed. The car proceeds were listed separately and scheduled for full return first. "You prepared this?" she asked. "With my accountant?" "Not the sighing one, the same one." "Did he sigh?" "Twice. She read every line." "Where will payments go?" "The managed account." "No. That's where the money came from. That account is closed to me. You have a card. My card stopped working. I can fix that. You can transfer repayment to the farm account or a new account in my name only." Evan's expression tightened. "Then how do bills get paid?" "I pay them." "Mom, the schedule depends on my agreement. That is my condition." He looked toward the window. Outside, sunlight lay thin across the harvested rows. "All right," he said, "and no management fee on repayment. I wasn't going to charge one." "You charge storage." "I know." It was the first time he had said those 2 words, without attaching a defense. Mara picked up her cinnamon roll. Why did you do it? I told you. The duplex delays. No. Why did my money become easier to use than telling me your company was in trouble? Evan pressed his thumb into the edge of his plate. Dad thought I was careless, he said. Sometimes you were. He never trusted the business. He loaned you money twice and asked for reports every month. He wanted to know where his money was. He made me feel 12. Mara waited. Evan looked older when he was not arguing. Gray showed at his temples. A faint burn scar crossed one forearm from a roofing job he had worked himself during the company's first year. When he got sick, Evan said, everything went sideways at once. I missed bids. My estimator left. The duplex inspection failed over work a subcontractor swore was done. Then Dad died, and you were sitting in that house with bills everywhere. There were 3 bills. It looked like chaos. To you. Yes. The admission came quietly. I thought if I could make one part of the family stable, the rest would follow, he said. Move you, use the house equity in my favor, keep the business going, put the money back before you ever needed it. You planned stability around me not noticing. I planned it around time. You did not have the right. I know. Do you? His eyes rose to hers. I know now. That was not an apology. It was closer than any explanation had been. Mara touched the repayment schedule. Your father might have helped if you asked. He would have said no. Then you understand the purpose of asking. Evan leaned back. Are you going to report me? The question startled her, not because she had considered it, but because he had. I am going to require repayment and control of my own accounts. What else I do depends on what you do next. His mouth tightened. So that hangs over me. No, consequences stand under you. That is why they feel heavy. He looked toward the green ledger on the side table. Beside it lay the crop share proposal. What's that agreement? He asked. Mine. I meant, I know. He stopped. They finished the cinnamon roll. Before leaving, Evan carried the ruined sofa from beside the shed to the county road pickup point. He asked first. Mara said yes. He did not inspect the roof or offer an estimate while he worked. At the gate, he wiped dust from his hands. Can I call next Saturday? Yes. He nodded, then hesitated. The orchard meant something to Granddad. It did. I thought it was gone. You never asked? No. Mara locked the gate after him. This time, he did not watch the padlock as though it accused him. Dale repaired the cottage roof Tuesday. Rain came Wednesday morning, and Mara stood beneath the former leak with the basin ready. The ceiling remained dry. At 9:14, $5,000 arrived in the farm account from Bennett Contracting. Mara transferred the exact amount to a new savings account at the same bank, held only in her name. The farm account would remain for orchard operations. She sent Evan a receipt and no gratitude. The payment restored only a fraction of what he owed. It did not return the house, the car, or the weeks she had spent asking where her own money was. Still, an obligation hidden as care had become a debt named in numbers. Luis objected to the crop share agreement's repair threshold. If equipment damage is caused by your irrigation failure, that comes off gross, he said. If your equipment damages my irrigation, it does not. Prove which happened. Document line condition before entry. That takes time. You will pay me for the time. They were back in his office with June and a local agricultural attorney, whom Mara paid for 1 hour of review. The attorney said little, which Mara appreciated at his rate. They settled on 54% of net crop revenue to Luis and 46% to Mara for the 6 eastern rows. Luis carried operating costs and production risk within an approved annual budget. Mara retained the land, water responsibility, tax responsibility, and final approval over permanent tree removal. Her record-keeping and harvest oversight were paid separately at the same hourly rate as her orchard bookkeeping work. The South Slope would enter the agreement only after a winter assessment and spring bloom count. The North Block remained Mara's problem. 3 years, Luis said. With annual budgets, 3. with termination for unapproved costs, failure to maintain insurance, or failure to provide records. Luis looked at June. "Did you teach her this?" June shook her head. "I told her not to buy a tractor." The attorney made final corrections. Mara signed only after reading every page again. Luis signed after pretending not to notice. No one applauded. No property changed hands. Luis wrote Mara an invoice for his share of the legal review, exactly as agreed. Outside, June handed Mara the winter rehabilitation schedule. "Dormant pruning starts in January," she said. "Tree removal after the ground firms. Pest plan by March." That sounds almost peaceful. It involves saws. Everything peaceful eventually does. Cold settled harder over the orchard. Mara worked mornings in Luis's office and 2 afternoons each month for Ruth Caldwell. She bought firewood, paid the electrician to certify the heater circuit, and learned which cottage window whistled in a north wind. Claire came for coffee twice. The second time, she brought paint samples. Mara chose none of them. Evan made the next scheduled payment 3 days late and included the late amount without being asked. Mara recorded both facts. When the first light snow arrived, it settled on the unharvested ruins beneath the trees and softened the broken south slope limb. The rusted gate wore a white line along its top rail. Beyond the eastern fence, Luis's equipment stood cleaned and covered. Mara walked the 6 shared rows with the new agreement folded in her coat pocket. The trees looked empty enough to be finished. She knew better now. Empty was not the same as available. It was not the same as useless. Sometimes empty was simply the condition required before new work could be seen. Snow hardened in the shaded lanes until Mara could walk over it without leaving a print. In January, Luis's pruning crew entered the 6 shared rows with saws, loppers, and the annual budget clipped inside Mara's ledger. The first cuts hurt to watch. Branches her father would have kept for 1 more season dropped into the snow. Water sprouts fell in pale bundles. Crowded centers opened to the sky. Mara followed behind, marking labor by block and checking each tree against June's plan. At the old, grafted tree in the north block, orange removal ribbons still circled the trunk. Luis stopped beside it. "This one comes out today. It isn't in the shared rows. You rented the saw crew for north removals. I rented 3 hours. This is an hour by itself. Then it becomes next year's problem." June knelt and pushed a probe into the softened trunk. It sank nearly 4 inches. "It may not stand another year," she said. "If it falls downhill, it takes the irrigation riser." Mara put one hand on the bark. She remembered her father carrying grafting tape in his teeth, swearing because the wind would not cooperate. The tree had produced apples for 4 decades. It had also become hollow while she was elsewhere. "Take it down," she said. The crew cut the upper limbs first. The trunk came last, tilting slowly before striking the frozen ground with a sound Mara felt through her boots. Inside, the wood was brown and wet around an empty center. Luis looked at her, but said nothing. "Put the labor against my north block hours," she said. "It already is. I know." That night, Mara brought in 1 sound piece of branch wood and set it beside the stove. Not as a relic. It was simply dry enough to burn after seasoning. She did not burn it that winter. Work carried her through the cold months. Luis's accounts became current. Ruth Caldwell's pear orchard stopped losing receipts inside a flour tin. Mara built block cost sheets that separated wishful production from profitable production, and both growers paid her on schedule. The cottage absorbed the money as quickly as she earned it. Dale repaired the last failed flashing. An electrician replaced the scorched burner circuit. Mara bought a used bed frame and a clean mattress, then stood in the store arguing over delivery charges until the manager reduced nothing. She paid them anyway. Claire helped paint the bedroom a warm cream Mara chose after rejecting 6 colors her daughter described as calming. "This one is called quiet linen," Claire said, holding up a sample. "Linen has never been quiet. It wrinkles publicly. What about soft harbor? I don't live in a harbor. You are impossible. I'm selecting paint, not a new personality." They settled on a color called Wheatfield because neither disliked it enough to continue. Claire came only when invited. She still arrived with groceries sometimes, but she began asking what Mara needed before buying them. The first time Mara answered toilet flapper, Claire stood in the plumbing aisle for 20 minutes and returned with 3. I wanted options. It is a rubber valve, not a husband. I had criteria. They installed the correct one together. Evan called most Saturdays. Some weeks Mara let him visit. Others she told him she had work or wanted the day alone. He stopped treating refusal as evidence of danger. His payments came according to schedule until March. Then one failed to arrive. Mara waited 2 days before calling. The project close moved, he said. I'll catch up next month. You did not call. I'm calling now. I called you. He sighed. I'm dealing with 5 things. I am not the 6th thing. I am the person you owe. I said I'll catch up. Send a revised date today. You have money coming in. That does not alter your debt. Silence stretched between them. April 15th, he said. Put it in writing. You really want to run this like a bank? A bank would charge interest and take your building. He sent the revised date. On April 14th, the payment arrived. Mara recorded it without praise. As snow retreated, pruning piles appeared along the lanes like rough brown nests. Louise charged removal to the agreed rows. Mara handled her own North Block debris in sections, cutting what she could from the ground and paying for anything larger. One afternoon, impatience put her 3 steps up a ladder with a saw. Louise found her reaching above shoulder height. What did June say? June says many things. What did she say about ladders? That they're tools. She did not say that. Mara sawed twice more. The branch shifted, pulling her weight forward. She caught herself, but the movement sent pain along her lower back. Louise took the saw. I was nearly through. You were nearly through several things. I can climb 3 steps. You can also fall 3 steps. She climbed down stiffly. The pain worsened overnight and forced her to spend 2 days at the cottage table with a heating pad while Louise's crew worked outside. She hated paying for labor she believed she could perform. She hated more that the crew completed in 2 hours what would have taken her a day. June visited with the spring plan and found Mara standing at the window. Your job is not to personally touch every tree, she said. It used to be. Your job is to keep the operation viable. That sounds suspiciously like management. Management is useful when people consent to it. Mara looked at her. June shrugged. I listen. Bloom arrived unevenly. The eastern rose opened first, white petals spreading through branches the winter cuts had thinned. Bees moved in the warming air. The north block showed gaps where old trees had been removed, but the emptiness no longer looked like failure. It looked measured. June counted bloom on the south slope. Louise evaluated access, irrigation, and labor costs. They agreed to add only 2 rows to the crop share arrangement for the 2nd year. 3, Mara said. 2, Louise answered. The 3rd has good set. The 3rd has poor structure. It can be trained at your cost. Then 2. Louise blinked. That was easier. I have discovered the beauty of making someone else wait for an argument. They signed the amendment after the spring budget was attached. Mara retained every ownership provision from the original agreement. Her paid role expanded to weekly field records during thinning and harvest preparation. The first codling moth pressure arrived in May. June showed Mari new damage near the south edge and adjusted the guidance. Louise scheduled treatment within his blocks. Mara paid for targeted control in the unshared rows she intended to keep and abandoned the weakest north rows for the season. Turning off their irrigation felt harsher than removing the trees. Leaves dulled as summer advanced. Mara walked those rows less often. You cannot save 14 acres on 4 acres of money, she wrote in the ledger. The sentence sounded like June. Mara disliked it enough to trust it. Evan visited in June carrying the square oak table from the old house. I thought you sold it with the rest, Mara said. I kept it in storage. My storage? He winced. My garage. The table had a water ring where Daniel always set his glass without a coaster. Mara ran her fingers over it. Why bring it now? The cottage table rocks. So do some families. I asked Claire whether you had room. You asked. Yes. Mara opened the gate wider. They carried the oak table inside together. Evan noticed the repaired roof, painted bedroom, safe heaters, and dry ceiling. He did not claim he could have done better. Over coffee, he said. The company is smaller. By choice? Eventually. He had let one lease expire, sold a truck, and stopped bidding jobs that required more credit than he could carry. No disaster had vanished. He simply described decisions with fewer excuses. Are you going to be all right? Mara asked. I don't know. It was the first honest answer he had given her without being cornered. She nodded. Neither do I. He looked toward the orchard. Can I walk the rows? With me. They went as far as the pond. Mara explained which blocks were shared and why the northern trees received less water. Evan listened. At the top of the hill, he looked down toward the cottage, shed and rusted gate. I understand why you stayed, he said. No, you understand why the view is good. That's something. It is. Summer brought heat, irrigation clogs, thinning bills, and fruit that remained stubbornly small through July. Mara kept records, checked lines, and worked mornings before the dust turned hot. She rested in the afternoon because her back had taught the lesson more effectively than June. Luis did not let friendship enter the pack forecast. The estimated crop would cover operating costs and leave Mara a modest share if grade held. Nothing more. By late August, color began spreading across the apples. The repaired eastern rows carried less fruit than a fantasy, and more than the year before. The two south rows remained uneven but viable. Claire came one Sunday and helped wash harvest bins. Evan arrived later after calling first. The three of them ate sandwiches at the oak table. No one mentioned selling the orchard. The first cold morning of early autumn left a silver edge on the grass. Luis's crew entered through the gate at 6. Mara signed the equipment sheet, checked block labels, and walked the eastern rows in her denim chore coat and rust-red flannel. Her silver braid lay against her back. Her wrist still ached in cold weather. Her boots leaked slightly at the left toe. She had slept poorly from worry over market prices. Nothing about the morning felt miraculous. Rosa lifted the first picking bag of the new harvest and nodded toward the tree. Your color is good. Our color, Mara said, indicating the crop share rows. Luis, passing behind them, called, That generosity better survive the invoice. Mara reached for an apple at shoulder height. She twisted upward. The stem released cleanly, leaving the spur intact for another season. She placed the apple in Rosa's bag. Then the row began to empty, one careful piece of fruit at a time. By 8, the crew had filled the first bin. The apples rolled together with a muted wooden sound. Mara checked the top layer for stem punctures, recorded the row and start time, then stepped aside as Luis moved the bin toward the lane. The second bin took longer. Fruit inside the canopy lacked color, and Rosa left it hanging. We come back? She asked. If the forecast holds, Mara said. Luis heard. If the forecast holds and the numbers justify a second pass. The numbers are allowed to ripen. They usually rot first. A coupling failed near the end of the third row. Water sprayed beneath the trees, soaking 2 picking bags and sending the crew around the leak. Mara shut that section down, measured the break, and wrote the repair against the shared block. Luis read over her shoulder. Existing line failure. Correct. Could be equipment damage. Your tractor was 2 rows away. Could be emotional equipment damage. I'll create a category. They replaced the section during lunch. Mara held the line while Luis tightened the coupling, each of them waiting for the other to claim more responsibility than the agreement required. When pressure returned, the repair held. Put that under shared irrigation, Luis said. It already is. I know. The harvest lasted 4 days. The eastern rows produced close to June's conservative estimate. The 2 south rows came in lower, with more sunburn and undersized fruit than Mara wanted to see. Louise sampled the second south bin and rejected nearly a third before it reached the cooperative. Processing? Mara asked. At today's price, yes. Fresh market, no. She cut 3 apples herself. His grading was correct. Processing, she said. No argument. Louise looked mildly disappointed. The cooperative ran Mara's lots beneath the Ortega crop share number, but kept every row separate. Mara stood behind the viewing window as apples moved beneath bright lights, turning in mechanical cups while cameras and human graders sorted them by color, size, and defect. There was no affection in the line. An apple that had survived drought, neglect, pruning, thinning, heat, and Mara's anxiety could still be sent to processing for a shallow bruise. She found this comforting. Standards did not flatter her or pity her. They produced a number she could work with. The eastern rows packed at 68%. The south rows pulled the average down to 64. Louise studied the preliminary report. Better than last year. That's a low branch. You still cleared it. Final sales would take time. Some fruit went into storage where price could improve or soften. Direct costs had to settle before the crop share could be calculated. Mara refused to predict a profit from unfinished figures. She returned to the orchard and prepared for the second pass. The fruit left behind colored well over 6 clear days. It produced 2 additional bins, one strong and one mixed. When the last bin departed through the rusted gate, Mara walked the harvested blocks alone. The trees looked relieved. Spurs remained intact. New pruning cuts had sealed properly. Emitters dripped where they should. In the north block, weeds had taken the rows she shut down, and several trees would need removal before spring. The orchard was not restored. It had become specific. At the cottage, the oak table held invoices in separate stacks: labor, equipment, packing, crop treatment, water, cottage expenses, and Mara's paid operational hours. Daniel's blue mug sat beside the calculator. The chipped edge fit her thumb. Claire called before Sunday coffee. May I bring Evan? Did he ask you to ask? Yes. Then he should call. He thinks you'll say no. That possibility belongs to asking. Evan called 11 minutes later. I'd like to come with Claire. For coffee? Yes. Anything else? I have a payment. Transfer it. I also want to talk. About selling? No. Construction? No. Mara looked through the window toward the clean, empty bins beside the shed. You may both come at 2. They arrived carrying a bakery box and a bag of coffee. Evan stopped the SUV on the public side, though the gate stood open for Luis's forklift. He called from his seat anyway. Mara walked down and met them. You could have driven in, she said. You said to call. I did. He waited. You may come in. Evan parked beside the cottage. Claire took the coffee inside while he stood near the porch with his hands in his jacket pockets. The final duplex receivable cleared, he said. How much can you repay? 11,000 now. Mara had expected 5. Without missing payroll? Yes. Without moving money from someone else? His face tightened, but he answered. Yes. Transfer it to the savings account. I already scheduled it. Tomorrow morning. How much remains? He told her. The number was still substantial. The house discount was not included, nor were the years of value she had given away believing she was buying family care. The car itself remained gone. Even when the account was repaid, nothing would turn backward. I sold the extra company truck, he said, and the equipment trailer for repayment. For the company. We had more overhead than work. Mara nodded. He looked toward the shed. How was harvest? Uneven? Profitable? Ask me when the last invoice arrives. A year earlier, he would have treated that answer as confusion. Now he said, fair. Inside, Claire had arranged the coffee, 3 plates, and cinnamon rolls on the oak table. She had also brought the old brass house key Mara once kept on the studio windowsill. I found this in my kitchen drawer, Claire said. I must have taken it when we cleared the house. Mara held it. The key no longer opened any door available to her. Keep it, she said. Claire looked surprised. It was yours. It isn't useful to me. I thought you might want it. For what? Claire closed her fingers around the key. I don't know. They sat. Wind moved through the bare upper branches outside, softer than the storm the year before. Evan glanced at the cost sheets. Can I ask about the agreement? You may ask. How long does Luis have use of the rows? 3 years under annual approved budgets. And you keep ownership? Yes. Can he record costs against the land? No. Can he, Evan? He stopped. You may be curious, Mara said. You may not inspect the agreement through conversation. He looked down at his coffee. All right. Claire broke a cinnamon roll into small pieces without eating them. I owe you an apology that doesn't include what I thought, she said. Mara waited. Claire took a breath. I made your grief evidence against you. I called control care because control was easier for me. I helped sell the house too quickly, supported the car sale, and let Evan manage money I never bothered to understand. Evan shifted, but Claire continued. I liked being the gentle one. It meant I could believe the hard decisions belonged to him. They belong to both of you, Mara said. Yes. Claire's eyes filled. I am sorry. The apology did not ask Mara to declare the wound closed. That made room for it. Thank you, Mara said. Evan stared at the water ring Daniel had left in the oak table. I'm sorry I took the money, he said. Not borrowed. Took. Mara's throat tightened. I thought I could put it back before it became real, he continued. Then every week I didn't tell you made telling you more expensive. When you found the orchard, I didn't see a place you could live. I saw an asset that could get me out. Yes. I'm still angry sometimes that you wouldn't help. I had helped. I know. You had the house, the car, and my savings. I know. And when that was insufficient, you came for the land. Evan's face reddened, but he stayed in his chair. Yes. Mara looked at both of them. They were not villains seated at her table. They were adults she loved who had benefited from treating her as less adult than themselves. Their sorrow did not undo their choices. Her love did not require her to pretend otherwise. I cannot promise forgiveness on a schedule, she said. I can promise clarity. The orchard will never secure your business. My accounts remain mine. You visit when invited. If I ask for help, you answer the question I ask, not the one that gives you control. Evan nodded. Claire asked, Can we still be your family? You are my family. It sounded harsher than comfort. Mara softened her voice. That is why the boundaries matter. They drank their coffee. Afterward, Claire washed the plates without reorganizing the cupboards. Evan noticed the porch step had loosened and asked whether Mara wanted him to tighten it. Not today, she said. He left it alone. The final crop statement arrived 2 weeks later. Mara printed it in Luis's office. He stood behind her with Elena while she entered fresh market sales, processing returns, storage fees, packing, labor, equipment, treatment, and water allocations. Your pencil is moving slowly, Luis said. The number sees, I'm serious. The number has met you. Mara calculated net revenue, applied the 54-46 split, added her separately paid field hours, then checked everything again from the beginning. After orchard expenses, property taxes, and the cottage repairs charged to that year, Mara finished $3,108 ahead. Not enough for a new car, not enough to replace the savings Evan still owed, not enough to rehabilitate the North Block, enough to establish an emergency reserve, cover winter utilities, and pay the deposit on the packing shed roof repair without borrowing. Luis looked at the bottom line. Modest. Profitable. Modestly profitable. You get paid to grow apples, not adjectives. Elena set a bottle of grocery store sparkling cider on the desk. I was told there would be an argument. There was, Mara said. I won. Luis pointed at the split. Debatable. June joined them after work. Ruth came with cheese, bread, and a pear tart she admitted had been made by someone else. They carried everything to Mara's packing shed, where Dale's crew had replaced the lifted roof sheets and reinforced the damaged edge. Mara had paid every invoice. The The shed still smelled of old timber and dust. Its walls remained weathered. Folding chairs did not match. Nobody confused it with a celebration financed by sudden wealth. Mara opened the gate for each vehicle. Claire arrived after calling, bringing soup in a slow cooker. Evan came separately with a folding table. He asked where she wanted it. Along the west wall. He placed it there and did not improve anything else. They ate beneath bare bulbs while the autumn light faded outside. Louise argued with Ruth about pear storage. Elena accused her brother of hiding unpaid fuel slips. June explained why one of Mara's North rows should remain out of production another year. Claire listened as Mara answered. No one spoke around her. When the evening cooled, the guests left in ones and twos. Mara stood at the gate saying goodnight. Evan and Claire were last. Sunday? Claire asked. Call Saturday. I will. Evan put his hands in his pockets. Next payment is due the 15th. I know you know. For once the repetition made Mara smile. They walked to their cars. Mara did not close the gate immediately. She watched their taillights descend the county road, then turned toward the property. The caretaker cottage glowed warmly beside the repaired shed. The lane climbed through harvested rows toward the pond. There were weak trees, unpaid future costs, and work waiting in every direction. There were also voices lingering in the shed, clean accounts on the oak table, and keys in Mara's pocket that opened doors still hers. She took hold of the rusted iron gate. Then she left it open a little longer and walked back inside.